Well, greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe. How are you guys doing tonight? And I believe Sir Pierce was the first one on tonight, if I am not mistaken. It is so good to see all of you tonight. And we've got a ton of people here. Got Deanna here, Kelly, Janie, Linda, Icarillion, Lisa. Hey, Lisa. P. Wayne, Arrow Whisperer, Stacy LK, Coco Bear, Catalin. Who else? And it's a ton of people. Well, hello. Good to see everybody tonight. I have a bandage here because I cut myself shaving, and then I cut myself cooking. Tonight I was cooking. I was chopping up vegetables, and I get in there. I got this nice cutting board, and I think I'm like that Chef Ramsay. I'm over there. And next thing you know, it's like whack. And yeah, so that happens every single time I cook. So if I'm ever missing a finger, you'll know why. Well, I just wanted to come on tonight and talk about the state of affairs. I mean, things are popping off all over. And before we do, let me add a little levity and humor to this. There was a third attempt to this weekend on President Trump. And I saw this and I thought it was pretty funny. So, the Babylon Bee is always on top of things. So, man, I have never seen so many people lose their mind over one person. I mean, it's truly, I don't know how to describe this TDS thing. I get it. Like, I get that there's from the Democrat side, I get that. Like they're sworn enemies. They're a devout socialists. They're promoting communism, socialism, all the different isms. And Trump is undoing all of that stuff. And so they're super angry at him for that. And they, orange man bad, that kind of thing. But to be fair, they have reduced their whole political slogan down to in a lot of different places, it's F Trump. That's their slogan. That's all it is. And they don't talk about the economy. They don't talk about crime. They don't talk about taxes. They don't talk about raising the standard of living, healthcare, nothing. It's just F Trump. And I expect that from the left. I have a hard time from the right. I get it. Like, you've got a lot of influencers out there who are a lot of them who have jumped down the rabbit hole, chasing after, flat Earth or some other kind of conspiracy theory that they just when you go down, at least on the right hand side of politics, when you go down these rabbit holes that are been around for a long time, flat Earth. There's all of this stuff within the Epstein files, all that. Now, the Epstein obviously is not a conspiracy theory, but follow me on this. Flat Earth. You've got the what are they saying about him? The deep state. All of the things that we talk about, like a lot of those things are true, and the Epstein files is true. And I get that, but when you see a lot of conservative influencers, it seems like when their whole channel is all about that and that's all they kind of focus on, they almost inevitably become anti-Semitic, and then they end up pinning everything on Trump. And whatever. It's like I don't understand the anti-Semitism part of it though, because they tie all these conspiracies somehow get tied back into the modern state of Israel, and I don't. They're like Israel today, aside from being ethnically Jewish and a party to the covenant with God, this everlasting covenant, because God, when he makes these everlasting covenants, are everlasting. You know what? They go from generation to generation to generation. They're never going to end. Hence the term everlasting. And in the Old Testament, there's covenants that were conditional, like the Mosaic covenant. If you obey my laws, if you do all the things I tell you, then I'm going to bless you. If you don't do the things I tell you to do, then I'm going to curse you, and you're going to be in a world of hurt. Though that's an example of a conditional covenant. There are unconditional covenants. This has nothing to do with how Israel acts their behavior. They are just recipients of this covenant, like the Abrahamic covenant. In Genesis 12, we see that Genesis 12, 1 through 3, that God is going to bless Abraham and his physical descendants, not his spiritual descendants, but his real life, flesh and blood, physical descendants, land, seed, and blessing. And he said, I'm going to bless those who bless you. I'm going to curse those who curse you. That has never been rescinded. And then we get to Genesis 15, God conducts this blood oath ceremony, and he makes Abraham fall asleep. And so God conducts this ceremony with himself on behalf of his own name, on behalf of Israel. So we know, like every other government in the world, that Israel is going to make mistakes. They're going to have corrupt leaders. They're going to have issues and things that they do in their party that are in their system that isn't, what we would consider, whether it's in American interest or if it's in a Christian or biblical interest. We know that there's times that these governments but every government does that. Every single government has got skeletons in the closet. Every single government has their own version of a deep state. They have crime, they have corruption, because we're all human, and humans are fallen. We're fallen human beings. We're sinful. We make mistakes. We look after our own self-interest. So I don't know why I'm going off on this whole thing, but the conspiracy theories. But it seems like all of these conservative folks, you see them on Instagram and Facebook and others, and you start watching them like, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that. And then they'll have a post just blasting Israel and saying that Israel's not the real Israel. And, just like Ian Carroll and, even Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, they all started out in one direction. And then by the time they get some popularity, they just start blasting Israel because I guess it's an easy target for them. So I'm not really sure why that happens and why that is, but Satan always hijacks those conspiracy threads, and it always goes back to blaming the Jews, almost inevitably. It's always tied back. Well, in Satan, in his nefarious genius, used Jewish men to bring on some really nasty things in this world, like Karl Marxism, the guy that created the Illuminati, whatever his name is, a German guy from the 1700s. I'm blanking on his name. The Rothschilds, Soros. I mean, there's a lot of bad Jewish people that have done a lot of damage to mankind, but that's not all Jewish people. And there's a lot of bad Gentiles that have done bad things and brought in bad, really bad ideologies. Charles Darwin. I mean, there's a ton of folks like this. So Joseph Smith. I mean, man, I could just make a whole channel or program about that. So there's a lot of bad Gentiles too. There's a lot of bad Jews and there's a lot of bad Gentiles. You know why? Because we're all fallen, sinful humans. That has nothing to do with the fact that God has made a covenant with the nation of Israel, with the people of Israel, the physical, biological descendants of Abraham that can trace their lineage. Even if they can't trace their lineage because they don't know what tribe they were in, after 2,000 years of being in diaspora, God knows who they are. And furthermore, Satan knows who they are. That's why Satan tried to have 6 million of them exterminated, or tried to exterminate all of the Jews in Europe in World War II. He wasn't killing fake Jews. He was killing real Jews. And, this whole idea that the Jews that are coming out of Europe, the Ashkenazi or the Sephardic, that they're not real Jews. Come on. I am so, I expect this from the leftists. I expect this from non-believers, but to hear it from Christians and guys spouting this garbage out of the pulpit, like it just, man, I wish I could shoot lightning bolts out of my fingers and just zap these guys every time they say stuff like that. It's infuriating because they don't even read their Bibles. And why am I so fired up tonight? I don't know. I was in Walmart earlier, so I had a really crazy last few days. I was going to do the Substack Live last week, and the stuff came up, family stuff, and I could not. There wasn't any way to fit that in there. So I owe you guys. I'll try and shoot for that Wednesday. But I was at Walmart tonight, and when I go to Walmart, I'm by myself. I'm just a single guy shopping. A single cart. I'm shopping groceries or whatever, and I have my headphones in. I'm not the most approachable guy. In fact, I usually have my business mode face on, and like people tell me that that's kind of scary. But this guy, big black guy, came up. Well, he wasn't black. He was a light skinned. I don't know what ethnicity he was, but handsome, athletic guy. Came up to me, and I'm thinking like, okay, this is odd. He's probably going to ask me for directions. So I pop my earpods out, and he starts asking me about if I want to learn about the seal of God. Again, we're in the Walmart. We're in the I don't know. It wasn't the aisle with the chips. It was the aisle right before the chips. You know what I'm talking about. And so I was like, "What do you mean the seal of God?" And he's like, I was like, "Do you mean the Holy Spirit?" And he goes, "No. I'm talking about like the Passover." I'm like, "Ooh, okay." So, anyways, we get to talking. Not very nice guy. And so I start probing him, asking him some questions about he's from the Church of God, which I'm really not familiar with at all. But so we get to talking, and I'm asking him questions. So then after a while, I start to say, well, I'm a dispensationalist, and here's how we interpret the Bible. And so I start going through dispensationalism about, how the same God who doesn't change has interacted with mankind in different ways because there's been different conditions on the ground. God dealt with Adam and Eve before they fell differently than how he dealt with them after they fell. He dealt with the people before Noah's flood differently than how he dealt with mankind after the flood. Before Abraham, after Abraham, before the law, after the law, before Christ came, after Christ came. There's these seismic changes in the spiritual realm and how God is orchestrating this whole narrative to play out. And so I don't know, about 5 minutes into this conversation, he starts like, well, okay, I see you. I was like, no, don't go yet. Let's talk about this. And so he finally kind of bolted from me after about 10 minutes. And I love that. I love when people try to proselytize me. I think it's amazing. Anyways, the way I asked them about the view on the rapture and all that, and so they're familiar with it, but my understanding, they just have there's one end at the end, and we didn't get a chance to go into all the details, so I'm gonna have to look into the whole Church of God stuff. But they basically believe that there's just the second coming, judgment, etc., and that's it. And I don't know what he believes about the tribulation or anything like that. So. Yeah. So when we lived in El Paso and when we weren't living on a military base, we would, we had lived off on the economy somewhere. We'd always have people knocking on the doors like Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses. And Rochelle would just be like, oh, here we go again. He's going to be out there for like 2 hours talking to these guys. And I loved it, man. I love to engage those guys. And anyways. So I'm not fired up in a bad way. I guess I'm fired up in a good way. But I do. It does make me angry to hear people spouting just nonsense about Israel. Orange man bad. Look, he's a political leader. Trump's a political leader. We know from Acts 17:26 and Daniel 2 and I believe Daniel 4. That God is the one that appoints these guys to be in power and puts them in power at the right time, the right place to accomplish his will, like he did with Cyrus, like he did with Nebuchadnezzar, like he's done with virtually every other leader that's ever lived and come along. And Trump is no different in that sense. God is using him for whatever. And maybe God is allowing him, Trump, in some misguided way to build the beast kingdom. And Trump's doing it for the intentions of making America great again, or he's doing it for national security, or what have you. But in reality, we know how this is all going to play out. And I wrote about this in my article, Blind Spot. I've talked about this for a number of years, but I wrote about it just recently in Blind Spot. So, hey, Jonathan Gaynor, good to see you. And we'll let it slide this time that you're late. And but he's a leader. He's a political leader. He's an appointed leader, just like any other leader. And we should not expect, even if he were a solid Christian man. Look at Jimmy Carter, man. That guy was supposedly a Christian conservative, or he wasn't a conservative, but he was a Christian, Southern Baptist. And he came in and did terrible damage to the United States. He did terrible things, and very weak and ineffectual leader. So I I just wanted a president that wasn't hostile to Christians, into the message, into allowing us to have open venues to share the gospel. You know, we had under the Biden administration, we had we almost had the Ministry of Truth, you know, become a new cabinet, probably like a cabinet level position that would have definitely shut all this down, you know. So, anyways, all that to say, welcome to Monday night. It's February the 23rd, and I am going to be on tomorrow night with Vindog. And I don't know off the top of my head, Vin, if I don't know if he's in the chat or not, but somewhere 6-ish, I think, is where we'll be on. And then Thursday I'll be on with, I'm supposed to be on with Curt Reed, but I had to bump the time because of a doctor's appointment for my daughter. So that we were supposed to go live at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, which would have been like 11 his time. I think we're going to bump to maybe 4 Central Standard Time and 2 his time, but I got to get back with him on that to make sure. I don't know if that's going to be live or pre-recorded or what have you, since I had to mess the time up. But so yeah, so that's this week. And then I'll shoot for Wednesday doing a Substack Live for the paid members, and come in. I want to do come in if you want to get on the camera too. If you want to jump on the camera with me and we can have a conversation, dialogue, whatever, ask questions, talk about what's going on. That's really what that Substack's for. It's kind of like how we were doing on Discord, but a little bit easier to get on than how Discord was. So in my bad last time, I think a lot of people did come on that if they're not a paid member, they're not able to chat, or I didn't realize that. I apologize for last time. So this is just one of the perks for the paid membership. All 700 of us. I wish. Most people don't want to get on the camera. I don't get that. Like, I mean, I get it, but come on. To the dude, question: what do you think of the $38 billion Trump is using to build detention centers in the United States? I am not familiar with $38 billion in detention centers. I know they were building them under, or basically every president has been building them to some extent. Is it another Franklin Roosevelt moment? Do you think that instead of the Japanese being locked up for being Japanese, they're just going to lock up who would Trump lock up? I'm not really sure who. But anyway, so I think tomorrow night is the State of the Union address. The Democrats are going to run their own State of the People, Party of the People, State, the People State. I think that's what it's called, the People State. Hey, thank you, T-Bone. The People State. It sounds almost communist in its title, like the People's Republic of California or something, or North Korea. So they're going to run a simultaneous one, which is whatever. Nobody's going to watch that anyways. But they're complaining, this whole no kings thing. Look, if you're a Democrat senator and you're on national TV blasting Trump and calling him all this and saying we don't need a king, we're not, blah blah blah, and they're comparing him to a fascist dictator. I don't know what country they're referring to, because I can't think of any fascist countries run by dictators that the dictator allowed his enemies to get on television and publicly blast them without automatically disappearing and never being seen again. So apparently the freedom of speech still exists in the United States, because we have all these lunatics on the left coming on. And there's some really squishy rhinos and some other Republicans that, in my opinion, just they're so hyper focused on one little issue that they're willing to tear the whole thing down. Anyways, I don't want to make this all about politics, but tonight is a lot about geopolitics. And Melody, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Tonight, so let me get started with this. I want to start with a couple of passages, and then we'll get into the bulk of the bulk of it. Thank you, Deborah. see here. Okay. From 2 Timothy 3. But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people turn away. That basically sounds like this sounds like the normal state of affairs today. That sounds like the zeitgeist that we're in, right? And it's endemic from top to bottom. Look, Trump's boastful. Trump is a lover of money. Trump is some of those things. He's not all of those things, but he is some of those things. But we see this attitude across every spectrum, from top to bottom. It just seems like it's the zeitgeist these days. Like it's not something that's it's not something that's openly championed, but it's championed as normal, if that makes any sense. Like it's part of just normal life. And I can't think of another generation when this has been this systemic across so much of the world, across the European, the European leaders, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all over the Middle East, Africa, South America. I mean, everywhere you go, it's just this problem. And it definitely notes or take note of the fact that Paul identified this as perilous times, that these would be very dangerous, perilous times. And I think that word perilous, if I remember correctly, is the same word that was used for the demoniac in the Gadarenes, that he was dangerous, that he was literally out of control, wild. And I bring this passage up for one point. As bad as we look at the world today, and as bad as the world is today, this is only the very, very, very beginning. Think about what's going on in Mexico. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. But think about what's going on in Mexico right now. That, I mean, I think one minute after the rapture, maybe not 1 minute, but very shortly thereafter the rapture, once people are realizing what's happening, or what happened, that the whole world is going to look like that. And it's just going to be chaos everywhere. So if you've seen the videos and the pictures and stuff about the Jalisco New Generation cartel down in Mexico, just basically torching everything and just, burning and blowing things up and shooting everything and just absolute chaos. That to me is what every major urban center in the world is going to look like shortly after the rapture. It's going to be chaos. And look, anytime they were willing to do that, they were willing to basically take over an entire state because their leader was killed, assassinated by the Mexican army. When that kind of restraint doesn't exist at any level, even from the spiritual all the way up to the governmental level, because the rapture is going to throw the world into a tailspin, not permanently, but it's going to be temporarily thrown into this tailspin, that these guys are going to go nuts, and they're just going to let loose, and they're going to just, whatever they think they can get away with, they're going to try and get away with it. And it's going to be an incredibly dangerous, violent time. I don't know how many people die in the gap between the rapture and the rapture of the church and the official start of the 70th week, but I don't even know where to speculate on that. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of people in every major urban center. I would imagine in even a lot of the suburban places, it's going to be pretty chaotic, and it's going to take the world a little bit of time, however long that time is, I don't know, but a little bit of time for the people that are left behind that are in power to regain control of their military bases, their the cities, the urban areas, whatever. Maybe that's what this detention centers are for. I don't know. It seems like there is we could look at like, okay, well, now they're looking at maybe just putting the excess illegal immigrants there that don't have a declared home or are, they don't know where to send them, and you can't send them all to Cuba or El Salvador. Thank you, James. Appreciate that. You can't send them all to Venezuela now that you're trying to stand Venezuela back up and get them back on their feet. I mean, there's got to be a place to put these folks. Like I guess the Alcatraz in Florida, the Gator Alcatraz or whatever it's called. That's what it'll start out with. But on this side of the rapture, that's what it's going to be used for. But I think that on the other side of the rapture, that will absolutely be turned against. Initially, it'll probably be turned against the people that are the rogue criminal elements that are preventing stability and law and order from kind of being imposed back over whatever territory or land. But then quickly that'll turn to Christians, or not Christians, but to the tribulation saints, those people that come to faith after the rapture. So to me, it seems like ultimately that's where those will go. So, all right, second passage is going to be from Second Peter. Beloved, I now write to you the second epistle, in both of which I stir up your pure minds by way of reminder, that you may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandment of God, the commandment of us, the apostles of the Lord and Savior, knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning. For this they willfully forget that by the word of God, the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until that day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men. But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So in this first passage, I'm looking at the state of the world today, and that's just the general condition everywhere we go, is that people are going to be looking after their own selves. They're not going to care about anybody else. It's like what Jesus said in the Olivet Discourse, that the hearts of many will turn cold. And this has been ongoing pretty much through the 20th century, but now this new generation, or it's generations really, it's really become ingrained into just the psyche of this whole generations, these last couple of generations. And I'm not blaming it all on them. I'm just saying that they're a product of the environment they grew up in. And, we live in the day and age now where the middle of the age of information, where you have more information at your fingertips than previous, all of human history really could have. And not only that, they have the information, but they're only getting summarized bits of information. So they're not getting the whole picture. And then they're forming these kind of half-baked conclusions on pick a topic. And then on top of that, they live in the most privileged age, I think, that man's ever lived in. Even the fact that we have ice cubes and air conditioning and heaters, and we have electricity, and we have, stuff that even the royalty back in the medieval times, or even in the 1800s and before, didn't have any of that stuff. So we live in a very privileged time, and we all want what's best for our children, and we all want to give them the world if we could. But on the same token, it's taken its toll, on they're not. And I have kids in this generation, so I'm speaking from experience, but like, they don't have the same toughness that we had to grow up with, when everything is handed to you, and not just from the parents, but I mean, everything is just there. And it's going to be a huge awakening, a rough awakening for a lot of kids. And not kids, but like young adults and stuff that are living their lives right now. They're not caring about the Lord. They're just trying to get their world set up, right? And even in this world, everything is falling apart. They're incredibly disillusioned. This whole idea of having a picket fence and having your 2-car garage and the wife and the kid, all that's gone in retirement. Like, everything is changing so rapidly. And I think it's made them very nihilistic, which feeds back into 2 Timothy 3. But for the 2 Peter passage, I believe that is dealing with the state of the church in these last days, and how much of the church now rejects the blessed hope. They reject just Bible prophecy in general. And it doesn't make any sense. I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around a Christian that claims to love Jesus, yet fights so hard against his return. They fight so hard, like beating the wind, or banging their head on a wall. It's not going to get them anywhere. Yet they hate the idea of Christ returning, and they'll couch it in this idea like, oh, the rapture is not a real thing, and it's not blah 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 blah. Like they treat the rapture as if the rapture in and of itself is a thing apart from Christ, not realizing that Christ's return is the rapture, that we are meeting our Creator, our Lord and Savior, and they fight against that. They hate it. They despise it. They hate us for it, and that doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. I don't know. Maybe somebody in the chat's got a better understanding. Like, are they? I don't think. I'm not saying that you have to be a true born again believer to believe in the rapture. I just don't know why that position, which is clearly taught in the Bible, is so hated by so-called Christians. It's like that guy tonight at Walmart, and he made a comment, something to the effect that, like, well, I see that you have your interpretation and I have mine, and blah blah. I was like, well, hold on. There's only one interpretation. I mean, the Bible is only going to play out one way. This isn't a choose your own adventure. This isn't the multiverse. Like in this reality it's post-trib, and then another reality it's pre-trib, and another reality it's pre-wrath, and another reality there is no wrath. Like, no, there's just the one reality, and there's one Bible, and it's going to play out one way. And so to that point, you can make the Bible say whatever you want it to say, which is why we have so many different kind of denominations today. There's thousands, right? That's easy. That's the easy part. Getting the Bible to not contradict itself with your position on any other doctrine, any of the other 99 doctrines, it can only happen one way. I mean, there's only one position that's going to align with every other doctrine. That's not going to contradict. Like, if I have a pre-trib position, I'm premillennial, pre-tribulation rapture believer. Does that doctrine, does that position, does that contradict the doctrine of the church, the ecclesiology? Does that contradict the doctrine on Israelology, of salvation, soteriology, of the Holy Spirit, pneumatology? It's easy. It is super easy to make the Bible say whatever you want it to say. It's impossible to make it say anything other than what the one position it teaches. Anytime you veer off and go to another direction, you're going to violate some other doctrine somewhere else. So being consistent across every single doctrine is the way that you can know you're believing the right position. And I was listening to Peter Gaiman, Dr. Gaiman. I don't know if somebody wants to throw his chat or his channel on the chat. He's a professor of Old Testament studies, really solid teacher, dispensational pre-trib guy. He was watching another video and kind of critiquing some of the arguments that they were making. And it's the same old, I guess these guys were all like Reformed theology or whatever, but it's the same old thing, that dispensationalism is new. It was invented by Darby and blah, blah, blah. And it came from Margaret MacDonald, and all of those things have been debunked 16 ways from Sunday easily. And yet they still parrot these things, these same garbage tropes like they're real. And, I don't know. I guess people are just intent on being wrong. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate you. So it's it's disconcerting, and a lot of these positions that the same sentiment, the same kind of attitude that we see in 2 Peter 3 is the same attitude that we see levied against the pre-trib position. I had a guy emailing me. He's upset, pissed off because I won't sit there and spend the next 3 years debating him on email when he made a statement to the effect of like, well, I was a big follower of Dave Hunt and Chuck, not Chuck Smith, Quintanilla House. Why am I blanking on this guy's name? Missler. Thank you, Hammer Time. I don't know. I have so much on my mind right now. Yeah, saying that he'd followed them for years and that he was still unconvinced, that they couldn't convince. I'm like, so why are you emailing me? If those two guys couldn't convince you, I'm not going to convince you. I can give you the evidence all day long, but if you're not going to accept it, that's on you. No skin off my teeth on that. So to the dude, thank you. All right, let's get started with tonight's program. That was the opening kind of monologue there. Sorry. All right, I wanted to talk about the world falling apart. What I mean by that is the world is not literally falling apart, but the geopolitical structure that we've been under for the last 40, 50 years, or 70 years, 75 years, is what's falling apart. So they call it the post-war liberal rules-based order, or the basic. I just call it Pax Americana because that's America was dominant in kind of everywhere during this time period, and that the way things are now falling apart, and the way the world is changing. We're in uncharted territory right now, or uncharted for them, right? We know from scripture where this is all going to lead to, but for them, this is all uncharted territory. And so we're seeing a lot of clashes and a lot of things happening in the world today that is from the observer looking at it. It just seems like they're not connected, and they're just chaos here, chaos there, chaos in Mexico, chaos in Ukraine, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, et cetera, et cetera. Like they're seeing all these different events taking place, and they're not seeing why they're happening. They're just being, they're just following the news and like, oh, it's this cartel is doing this or this, whatever. But the reason why these folks are doing, why is the world like this? Why is the world so chaotic? For one, the Bible said it was going to be like this. So when I hear post-millennialists talking about, the world's got to reclaim the church has got to reclaim the world for Christ with the 7 mountain mandates, even MAGA, even those sentiments of, within Christian nationalism that we're going to reclaim the country, we're going to make it a Christian nation again, and blah, blah, blah. As well-meaning as those things are, they're misguided, because according to scripture, the last days are going to be perilous times. And then Paul lists all those issues: lovers of themselves, haughty, headstrong, despisers of good, disobedient to parents, etc., etc. And then the second part of it is also that there's just going to be this general skepticism about anything having to do with Christ, his return, God, because it's been 2,000 years. And think about this in this way, like think about Israel as a microcosm in the intertestamental period. So between the last prophet, I believe to be Malachi, in the 400s, 400s time period there, and then the coming of Christ, you had these basically 4 centuries of it was silence from God. There wasn't any new prophets happening. Now, prophecy was being fulfilled during this time. A lot of what Daniel had prophesied in Daniel 8 and parts of Daniel 11 or 10, 11 are now playing out in those silent years, the so-called silent years. But there wasn't any new revelation from God coming out. What was happening was that fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies were now playing out geopolitically, in Daniel's day. So Babylon was in power, and then the Persians came over and conquered them, and then after them the Greeks came, and then Alexander the Great died, and his 4 generals divide up the empire, and then those eventually get absorbed into what would become the Roman Empire. So that to me is the geopolitical reality of the prophetic truth that had been just pronounced in Scripture. That was 400 years, and just think about this. So by the time Jesus was born, the wise men show up there in Jerusalem, this whole entourage, and they show up and they appear in Herod's court, saying, "Where's the one who was born King of the Jews? We've seen his star from afar. We've come to worship him." And Herod's like, "What are these guys talking about?" And he turns to his priest and his Sanhedrin folks, whoever's there in the royal court, and they're like, "That's just some old prophecy from Micah. It doesn't mean anything." And it didn't mean anything to them because they didn't even go with the wise men, the 5 miles or wherever, how far it would have been to walk to Bethlehem from there. And that's how much either disdain or how much they didn't believe it. So that was their attitude after 400 years. It's been almost 2,000 years since Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. And the church has still, from the early church days all the way through the Roman Empire, the collapsing of the Roman Empire, the rising of the Holy Roman Empire, the Middle Ages, the Reformation, the breaking out of all these different Protestant denominations, the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening, the rise and fall of empires. All this stuff is happening during these 2,000 years, and the church has remained. The church has not gone out, right? And the church would remain because in Matthew 16, remember, Jesus said that upon this rock, talking about Peter's confession that he is the Christ, Son of the living God, that the church, that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. And it hasn't. The church has still remained and still thrived, and still wherever the Holy Spirit's active and moving, the Holy Spirit is omnipresent. But wherever, it seems like places like Iran, there is a huge, massive, probably the biggest in the Middle East, turning away from Islam into Christianity of any section of the world, with the exception of maybe Indonesia and probably parts of China that we just don't know. There's going to be places we just don't know about. We're not getting any feedback because they're so closed off. And even in places like North Korea, the gospel gets in there. So the point is that the church has not, the light of the church has not gone extinct. It's not gone out. And it's just like Jesus said, it would remain until he comes in the end. And so the church age has continued all through this time. And yet, look how many in the church today don't even care. They don't teach about prophecy. They don't want to talk about it. It's not in their curriculum. It's not in their program. It's not anything they factor into their planning for weekly services or their monthly plan or their yearly plan. And it's sad, really. I mean, we live in the most prophetic times since Christ was here the last time, and yet the church is sound asleep, and not paying attention to what's going on. So because the pulpits aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's what has led to the rise of alternative media ministries and things like this. And, I'm not a minister. I didn't go to seminary. I just have a love for the Bible, and I've studied it intensely for the last, 17 years. And I'm certainly not the smartest guy out there. There's a lot of smarter fellows out here on YouTube with us, but we're just kind of co-laborers, and we just want to make sure that the gospel, the good news that Jesus Christ came, was born of a virgin, lived a sinless life, died for our sins, rose again on the third day. And when we believe in his finished work, that he conquered not only death and hell, but that his death is enough to pay for our sins, then that is what saves you. That right there, believing that, changing your mind from the way you were to now believing that I can't pay for my own sins. I have to look to this one named Jesus to pay for my sins because I am incapable of doing it. Once you grasp that and realize that, not just with your head knowledge, but with your heart knowledge, you know that you're born again, because at that moment, according to Ephesians chapter 1, 11 through 14, you are sealed by the Holy Spirit until the day of redemption. Ephesians 11 through 14, 1, 11 through 14, and then Ephesians 4:30 are very explicit in this, that you're sealed until the day of redemption. And the fact that you're saved, and I'm blanking on the exact passage right now, but Jesus becomes the author and the finisher of your faith. I believe it's in Hebrews. He's the author and the finisher of your faith. Author and finisher. So he's got it all, right? The moment you get saved, you're sealed by the Holy Spirit until the day of redemption. And so when you think about salvation, a lot of churches mess this up. And I meant to talk to this guy tonight, but I didn't get a chance to because he ran off earlier. But the whole idea of salvation, it's in three parts, three tenses, right? You have the justification part, the sanctification, and the glorification. The justification is a one-time event. You can't undo it and you can't redo it. When it happens, it's done. It's like being born. You can't go back into your mother's womb again and just pretend it never happened. No, you're born again, right? You were born again. Now begins the long process, the sanctification process that each believer walks through. Whenever they lived, however long they lived, we all go through this process of sanctification, of being drawing closer to God and trying to be more Christ-like. A great passage that I love dearly is Ephesians 4, 11 through 16, talking about all of those. Let me just read it, because I'd be remiss if I didn't. Ephesians 4, if you have your Bibles, 11 through 16. And he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. He's talking about the callings, the gifts and callings of the Lord, that we're all called to different things, right? And for the equipping of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we should no longer be children tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body is joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes the growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. So our goal in the process of sanctification is to grow in all things that is Christ. And in whatever he's called us to do is to take that and you run with it. You don't stop running until either he calls us up or he calls you up individually, right? So that is the goal for every believer, is to grow in Christ. And I love that part about unity of the faith, till we all come to the unity of faith. You know what's going to be amazing in heaven is that there's not going to be any theological disagreements. We're not going to argue about the rapture. We're not going to be arguing about whether creation was 6 literal days or 6 periods of time, or whether there was a gap or not a gap, or whether Noah's flood was local or global. None of that stuff is going to be argued about. We're not going to argue about baptism, about salvation. We're all going to know the truth, because there's only one truth, right? And we're all going to be in agreement. That's going to be an amazing time. I've never been, y'all have never been anywhere where everybody agrees on everything, in regard to a church. How amazing is that going to be? How much can we get done as people, as humans, glorified humans at that point, in the service of the Lord, when we're all on the same sheet of music? Can you imagine that? Yeah, it's going to be awesome. All right. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, and I want to talk about the things going on in the world today and how they're connected. And I forgot this last time because I was talking about all of the I was talking about all the events then, and then I was talking about how what that has to do with childbirth. So remind me again today before the end, because I'll tie it in this time with the childbirth thing. But last part, I need to summarize what I just said, because if I can, I'm not going to sleep good tonight if I don't. So justification, one-time event. You can't undo it and you can't redo it. Sanctification, a lifelong event, from the moment you're born again until the day that either you die or you're raptured up into glory. And the last part of the glorification, that's a one-time event. That's going to happen one time for the believers, and that will happen at the rapture of the church. And we'll be given our new glorified bodies. We're not going to be wispy spirits that float around for the rest of eternity, kind of just flittering and floating. We're going to have real bodies, permanent, immortal, glorified bodies. What they look like exactly, I have no idea. I always kind of liken it to the idea that you're going to be you, but like the perfect version of you, had sin never entered the world. And with that, I would have full handlebar mustache. You know, that's what I'm hoping for. Big mutton chop sideburns. You know, business in the front, big long mullet in the rear. So I don't know. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. Thank you, Martha. I appreciate you. I'm being silly. I do want the handlebar mustache though. All right. All right. Let's talk about global violence and geopolitical conflict. So right now we've got 2 aircraft carrier groups in the Middle East. Or one is in the vicinity of Crete, off the coast of Israel. I believe that's the Gerald R. Ford carrier group. And then you have the Abraham Lincoln carrier group, which is down off the coast of Saudi Arabia. In fact, I think I have a graphic. Yeah, I do. Let me send this to myself real quick. Okay, so a lot of people are asking, okay, so what's going to happen? Are we going to war with Iran? Is the U.S. going to do some kind of regime change with them? And my gut, my heart says yes, that's going to happen. You don't have that kind of firepower. You don't have that kind of, you don't move all that stuff. You're talking about billions of dollars of, or hundreds of millions of dollars that it costs to move that amount of military equipment into that area. So let me see, let me get the map up here. There we go. That is a lot of firepower that is encircling and basically sieging the nation of Iran right now. I don't see how that this does not escalate into a full-blown strike on all of Iran's potential and currently existing ICBM launch sites, their storage sites, the little hidey holes that like the Khomeini is going to go hide into, all of those places. I think that is going to be, I think so. What I think will happen is this is going to be a very serious, full-blown strike on all of Iran's capabilities, military capabilities. I don't think it'll be prolonged because General Kane, Raising Kane, is saying, hey, if we basically shoot all of our munitions here, that's going to leave us woefully underprepared for China. So I think it'll be limited in that sense. They're not going to throw every single thing at it, but I do think it's going to be serious, and it'll be enough to dismantle the regime from their leadership and basically potentially look to a regime change. And what Iran, so think about it this way. So with Venezuela, for example, when you think about the idea of Fortress America, what is Fortress America? It's about securing America into the future and making sure that we always remain essential, which is where the idea of selling these stacks, these packages of technology with the hardware, the software, the AI, the energy, etc. That comes together as the stacks, basically making the whole world operate under our stacks. Well, energy then becomes a huge issue. Iran's got a lot of oil. Venezuela's got a lot of oil. Their oils are very different. Venezuela's very thick, and it takes a lot to move it. It doesn't even move through pipelines. But then Iran's is very thin, and you take those and you can mix those together, and it makes them very usable. Well, what this is also doing in setting up the energy, we don't need Iran to be America Junior down there, but we do want them to be friendly to the U.S. and we want to be able to do trade deals with them and business with them. And right now, we cannot do that with the Khomeini regime, and we couldn't do that with the Maduro regime either. So it seems like that in the long run, that this is going to be used to secure America's energy interests going into the future. But it also is denying China's energy needs, because China buys a lot of oil from both of those two. So, if China is our greatest threat, we're starting to cut the legs out from China earlier, and we're dismantling it from kind of the bottom up, so that by the time we get to the fact of a direct military confrontation with China over, say, Taiwan, they are not going to have the resources to any kind of prolonged or sustained fighting against the United States. They're not going to have the oil anymore, the access to the oil anymore. Very, I don't want to say similar, but some kind of similar to how it was in World War II, where MacArthur had the military strategy called "hit them where they're not," and that was basically going all throughout the Indonesian archipelago and all the different island chains there in the Pacific, and basically making those people pro-US before the Japanese ever get there. And so you're basically making enemies for the Japanese. At every island you go in and you support them, you give them equipment, you give them aid, you give them support, help. Say, hey, we're your friends. When we're done here, we're going to leave you alone. But if the Japanese come in, they're going to take over forever. So we went around and making friends everywhere. And so this is kind of like that in a way, where we are securing these energy stores ahead of time. And it does have this huge ripple effect, because ultimately this is to box China in and to prevent China from ever waging a full-scale war against the United States. Okay, second part to this was the civil war strife, whatever is going on inside of Iran itself. So somewhere in between 30,000 and, I don't know, upwards of 100,000 Iranians have been killed by their government because of the protest. We don't know the full extent of the total deaths that's happened there, but a lot of people, and I think probably Trump didn't do himself any service by saying that if putting these kind of red lines out there saying, if you kill any more protesters, we're coming in. Well, he should have said something to the effect that, hey, this is not acceptable, we are not going to tolerate this, prepare for war, or something to that effect. But by committing the United States to this already to protect the Iranians, we've kind of boxed ourselves in this kind of, we're in a rut right now. We're not going to be able to get out of it left or right without some kind of direct military confrontation. And a lot of people will ask, well, how does that fit in with Gog and Magog? Well, or Jeremiah 49, the breaking of the bow of Elam. I think in part that if you look at Jeremiah 49, the diaspora that the Iranians are going to be put into, that it mentions there in the chapter, they've been in that diaspora now since 79, since the Iranian Revolution, because millions of Iranians fled, Persians fled, after the Khomeini regime took over. And once they became extremely radical, people were leaving left and right. So there's a lot of pockets, the Iranians are in a diaspora themselves right now, a lot of them. And I think ultimately what this will happen is there will be some type of regime change, but I don't know that anything substantive is going to arise from this destruction. I think what could possibly happen is that it's such a strategic strike or series of strikes that basically it's not going to be livable. You're not going to want to live there. If their nuclear facilities are all leaking radiation and stuff like that, after these serious strikes, nobody's going to be able to live there. And so how does that factor into Gog and Magog? Is that Gog and Magog, I think at that point, after the rapture, it seems like it might be a staging ground of some sorts, similar to how Armageddon is going to be a staging ground for the final battle there, right before the second coming. So I think Turkey, Iran, Libya, Sudan, Ethiopia, those places seem to be staging grounds for this massive armies that will be beginning their march against Israel. And I think what's unique about this particular war is it's not going to be all Sunni Arab. You're going to have Sunnis, you're going to have Shia, you're going to have Sunni Arabs, Sunni Turks. You'll have Turkmens, you'll have all the folks from the former Soviet satellite states marching. And again, Muslims coming out of Europe, because this is like how it was for the Crusades, how the Catholic Church was able to rally, tens of thousands of Europeans to come march and reclaim Jerusalem. It's going to be a holy war for them. And I think that that's why we see it coming from all the different corners of the world, the cardinal directions of the world, rather, that they're going to be coming from all directions. It's going to seem hopeless for Israel. As powerful as they are, it's going to seem hopeless because it's going to be so overwhelming. And the United States is going to be in collapse, disarray, whatever after the rapture. And presumably a lot of the whole world, economically is going to be in varying stages of collapse, because when the US goes down and everybody's tied in with the US, I mean, it's going to be incredibly chaotic, economically speaking, throughout the world's economy. So I think that the enemies of Israel at that point are going to want to take advantage of this chaos, just like every other criminal element does. When law and order has been suspended, or it's distracted, or it's not capable of performing its duties, what do the bad guys do? They take advantage of the chaos. And I think this is exactly what happened with Gog and Magog. They're going to take advantage of this chaos caused by the rapture of the church, and they're going to try and march and take out Israel once and for all. And that's when God comes in and supernaturally delivers them. Okay. So how does that end up with Reza Shah Pahlavi coming back into power? I don't know. I thought so at first. It seemed like early on it might look like that, but now it doesn't. And now it doesn't seem like he is going to be taken over. And Iran may end up becoming like an Afghanistan in a way, kind of destabilized to the point. And there's a lot of sections of Iran that you're not going to be able to go into because of the nuclear radiation, or whatever the contamination is going to be from that. So then you got to factor in all of Iran's proxies like the Houthis, the Hezbollah, which I imagine while the U.S. is directly tackling Iran, that Israel will do strategic strikes in Yemen, and they'll do strategic strikes in Lebanon against Hezbollah. And trying to think who else they might have used in that area. Hamas is in shambles right now. Any other proxy groups there operating out of Judea and Samaria or Jordan, I would imagine they were also fair game for Israel, for the IDF to turn on them. Okay, let's move to Mexico, Latin America. Okay, so let me bring this up here. If you remember back to the 1970s and 80s, the Colombians became the biggest narco groups in the world at the time. And the U.S. spent basically all of the 80s dismantling the Colombian cartels. And a lot of those groups basically spread out from there. Once El Chavo, or what's his name? Is it Chapo Guzman? The Colombian guy. once he was taken out and his organization was dismantled, a lot of those folks fled, and they franchised what El Chapo had, and basically took it and went off to Mexico, went off to all these other different places, and began forming their own gangs and forming their own system, which is why we have this explosion of MS-13, Tren de Aragua, all the different cartels. It just kind of exploded. That all of a sudden there's all these groups now operating, and they're all want a piece of the drug market because of how lucrative it is. Not only that, but now they have, they did back in the 70s and 80s too, access to these offshore banking systems that were set up by the British. And why does the British need all these offshore banking systems that are not tied in with, well, because they want to kind of remain the deep state of the world and the ultimate mover and shaker. So you need to have your finances completely disconnected from any particular government that may seek to control it. So they do these offshore accounts. But in those offshore accounts, you have billions of dollars being pushed through by the narco terrorist groups because they don't want their money taken by a particular government. So they have these offshore banking accounts. And so then the British, the European elites, etc., not just the European elites, but whoever's, the elites that are using these offshore banking systems, that all that narco terrorism money, like upwards of $400 billion all the time, is kind of flowing through. It provides the liquidity for the offshore banking systems for that to actually work. So that's why they allow it. They allow these narco terrorist groups and tin pot dictators and fascist dictators and all these little banana republic dictators to store and save their money in these systems so that everybody can operate outside of the normal rules-based order. Now, what we're looking at here today is the orange section here, which is the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or the CJ, what is it? The CJNC. The head of that was a man named, I don't know his name off the top of my head, but his nickname was El Mencho. And he'd been running that thing since the 90s. He was the most powerful drug cartel leader in Latin America. After Maduro, he was the next guy. And incredibly violent, incredibly vicious. I mean, these cartel dudes are no joke. They make the Taliban look like a bunch of amateurs. Like, they are incredibly vicious. Thankfully for us that there was a bunch of them, because now they're all fighting each other, trying to take control. So they are busy warring with each other. And in the process, the U.S. provided Mexico, the Mexican special forces, with some joint training operations with the SEAL teams and U.S. intelligence, providing the exact location, pattern of life, and all that for El Mencho in his little mountain fortress. They provided all that for the Mexican special forces. They were able to go in there, and after an intense firefight, took him out. And they were transporting him to Mexico City, and he died, from my understanding, he died in the helicopter on the way from wounds, gunshot wounds. So that, to me, the whole idea with Mexico is, especially with as many Americans that are trapped down there in places like Puerto Vallarta and Puerto Vallarta and any of the other little tourist areas there, they're stuck. We got one of our 310 tribe members down there. Last I heard, he was doing okay. He made it back to his hotel and got his phone charged and some things like that. So I think that they're staying put until the violence dies down. Now, there was a ton of violence yesterday. I haven't heard that much today of what's going on. I think the armies have basically reclaimed a lot of the cities there, or some of the cities there, and are these groups, I think, are moving back into the shadows. I don't know if they're going to re-engage at any point here in the next few days, but it seems like they're going to have to regroup and then go back to preventing other cartels from fighting them and trying to take over their territory. So they're not only fighting the Mexican army and the Mexican government, and I don't mean President Sheinbaum. She seems very much in league with those guys, but the parts of the Mexican government that are not corrupted and have not been bought and paid for by the cartels yet. It seems like these cartels are not only having to fight the government, but they have to fight each other. And these, very brutal turf wars that happen up down there, just right on the other side of the border. And, which is why we needed a border fence, we needed a very secure border to prevent all the human trafficking and the drug trafficking and everything else that's been going on for the Biden administration, even during Trump's first administration, and, all through the Obamas, through the Bushes, the Clintons. I mean, this is going back a couple of decades now that these folks have been operating pretty freely over the border. And with Trump coming in the second time and shutting all that down, and not only shutting it down, but taking Maduro out, shooting the drug boats in the Caribbean, probably running drones 24/7 over Mexico. They're like a trapped animal. They're incredibly dangerous right now because of the walls are closing in. They were losing their sources of money, their sources of income, their sources of power. The pressure that the Trump administration has put on China for the production of the materials that go into fentanyl. It's been multifaceted, targeting the money, targeting anybody associated with these groups, declaring them to be, internationally recognized terrorist organizations. So the walls are closing in on them. And so now they're becoming incredibly dangerous. I don't see Mexico getting any better in the next months to, years if we're here. I do think that they'll increasingly become destabilized. But ultimately, at the end of all this, after the rapture, at some point when the beast system is coming online, I do believe that this whole region from Mexico on through the United States into Canada, into Greenland and Alaska will then become what, the North, the Technate map that we're all familiar with, or the Club of Rome map that has the world broken up into these, I think it's 10 regions or whatever. I think that's exactly how that'll all play out. That this eventually, after the rapture, this beast system that comes online will be so incredibly powerful that nobody's going to be able to stand up against this system. But when you read about the white horse, when we read about the opening of the first seal judgment, which is the rider on the white horse that goes forth as a conqueror to conquer, and he has a bow but no arrow, and I'm still on the fence about this, whether it's the Antichrist, the man, or if it's the Antichrist system. It's the system of the beast itself that goes forth riding and conquering, right? Somewhere in there you have the 10 kings, but then right after that you have the red horse, the rider on the red horse. I think that when this peace is taken from the earth, as this beast kingdom is coming online, you're going to have a lot of these groups down in places like Mexico, for example, all these cartels that are not going to want to bow the knee to the beast kingdom or whatever that system is, because they don't want anybody telling them what to do other than their own internal leadership. It's going to be forces like these guys that are going to be make up a huge portion of the bloodshed that is going to be waged against them from the beast system to bring them online and bring them into the system. And they're not going to want to go willingly. So I think that the rider on the red horse, and not just there, but obviously there's going to be pockets around the world, Middle East, China, or, Asia, Russia, Europe. There's going to be places all over that they're not going to want to bend the knee. They're going to want to stay separate from this beast kingdom that's coming online. But the beast kingdom is not going to allow them to, and they're going to just mercilessly destroy them in a wave of bloodshed, unlike probably anything we've ever seen. And I believe that that's probably what's rolled up into the quarter of the world's population dying at this time, is a lot of the death that comes about as the opening of the second seal, which is the rider on the red horse. So that's neither here nor there at this point. Right now, I think for what we're looking at with Mexico, I do believe that Mexico is going to remain incredibly destabilized, at least for the next year, possibly 2 years. I expect the Sinaloa, all the different cartels that are mentioned there, Cartel del Noreste, Cartel del Golfo, all of these groups coming in and trying to claim what had formerly been El Mencho's territory, the New Generation Cartel. and there's gonna be a lot of turf wars. And at some point, the Mexican government, if it gets too out of control, they may ask the U.S. for support. Then the U.S. may commit troops or forces or technologies or tier 1 groups going down there and helping the government reclaim all that territory from the cartels. And ultimately, we know that inside of the 70th week, that this will be rolled up into the North American region of the Beast Kingdom. Right. We talked a little bit about Venezuela. Right now, I think Venezuela taking a Maduro, allowing for the government to stay in place there, so long as they are doing what the Americans tell them to do. We're going to see that is a domino effect in geopolitics. By taking out Maduro, that cancels all the deals that he had made with China and Russia in terms of the black market oils. And then from there, it also is going to deny Cuba from the much needed oil that they've been very dependent upon Venezuela for so many years now. So Cuba will probably collapse this year at some point. I'm almost certain that they will collapse. If they don't get any outside assistance from Russia or whoever, they're going to collapse. There's no way they can sustain. I mean, they're basically out of electricity now on the island. So I think very shortly we're going to see Cuba collapse. And then, like I said, from there, that was the last bastion of communist, pure communist governments left in the Western Hemisphere is there with Cuba. Now we still have communist people, politicians, Mamdani, the mayor of New York, Bernie Sanders. I'm sure the president of Peru is kind of socialistic, and you have some various socialists here and there. But in terms of being the last vestige of the Cold War era, Cuba, they're done this year. So, all right. Europe, Eurasia. So right now, basically the gist of it is that Russia is ready to make a deal. Ukraine is not, because Ukraine is led by Zelensky, who is a narcissistic, egotistical former actor / tin pot dictator, very corrupt. The whole system there is corrupt, but he is not gonna give up because he's being propped up by the Europeans right now, and the Europeans want to commit more resources, more arms, even boots on the ground. You had Boris Johnson in the UK going around trying to rally public sentiment that we need to send non-combat troops into Ukraine for like logistics, supply, medical, etc., to aid the Ukrainians, further sustaining the length of the war. I don't think that's going to happen. I honestly think that this whole thing with Ukraine will be over fairly soon. Well, let me rephrase that. It'll be over as soon as the rapture happens. It will be over with, because Russia's just going to roll in there and just absolutely roll over them. And there's not going to be anybody to stop them at that point, because the world's going to be, in a state of chaos in and of itself. So, and I think that when we look at Gog and Magog, I don't know that the Gog is going to be Russia proper, per se. Like, I think that when we look at Russia, you got to take into account all of how Muslim that Russia has become. The southern provinces of Chechnya and Dagestan and Georgia and all those places. And Georgia's not Russian, but all of those places are heavily Muslim. So I think that if you're Putin and you're leery of your own country becoming a Muslim caliphate, you don't mind working with them, but you don't want to live under their rules, right? Let's say you're a Russian, and the Chechens want to go get rolled up into this fight to reclaim Israel. You're just going to say, all right, see you later. Have fun. Good luck to you. And as long as the Russians can maintain their presence in there and maintain their warm water port access, I don't know that because Russia's already wasted how many hundreds of thousands of men trying to take Ukraine, and they haven't been able to do it. And the same thing with Ukraine. And I'm not saying all the Ukrainians are bad. I'm just saying the government is corrupt, and just like the Russian government is corrupt, and just like the Belarusian government is corrupt, and on and on and on. They're all corrupt on that side, but the people there are kind of trapped. And so I think that what could possibly play out in terms of Gog and Magog, since that seems to be so close on the horizon, is that a lot of these Muslim majority sections of Russia, i.e. Dagestan, Chechnya, I don't know all the different regions off the top of my head, but most of those being on the southern side of Russia, are going to join in on this fight, and they're going to get wiped out in the Gog and Magog battle. And so what happens after that is then it creates a vacuum. Just like the rapture of the church is going to create a vacuum in the world. Nature hates a vacuum, right? So nature is going to fill this vacuum. So when the true body of Christ is removed from the earth, what's going to be left? You're going to have essentially the Roman Catholic system. You'll have the Roman Catholics, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, the people playing Christian all across, every denomination. You're going to have the non-believers, the pagans, the Muslims, the Buddhists, the on and on and on. You're going to have all these sections, and they're in the absence of both true born-again believers and with a majority of the Muslim forces, and I mean the militant forces that are what make Islam dangerous today. With both of those gone, the church in heaven and the forces there of Gog and Magog being destroyed, that creates a vacuum. What fills that vacuum? So geopolitically, the beast kingdom is going to come in and start setting up itself as this new Roman Empire, revived Roman Empire, Rome 2.0, whatever they're going to call themselves. But it's going to be this new global system that seems to be regionally structured, but also imperial in the sense that they're all going to follow the leadership of this, essentially like an oligarchy, like these 10 kings. And out of the 10 kings rises the Antichrist, right? So from there, though, you have, going back to the church, with the church removed, what's going to be left? You're going to have a lot of religions that are no longer, well, let me put it this way. The only monotheistic religion that's truly going to be monotheistic at the end of all that is going to be Judaism. Islam, I think, will be rolled up into just whatever this new global ecumenical church body that's going to be called the Whore of Babylon. That's what this new system is going to be. And if you add in artificial intelligence and you add in disclosure, alien life, whatever, these things actually coming down after the rapture and presenting themselves, hey, you're not alone in the universe. All of that is going to be part and parcel of this new belief system that's going to come about. And whatever the reason is they have for the church disappearing, the aliens can say, hey, yeah, we took them. They were troublemakers. We got rid of them. Or, whatever they're going to say is going to be something the world believes, and it's going to empower this. And the reason I'm pointing out the Roman Catholic Church as being kind of the linchpin in all this is because geopolitically, logistically, economically, historically, they're the most and best suited to, they already have a global footprint. They already have a global infrastructure. They already have a global mindset in how they run their organizations. So for them, they seem to be the best suited to take on this role of this final world religion. And they'll just bring in everybody in. Even Pope Francis was like, hey, you can be an atheist and go to heaven. Pope John Paul II was kissing the Quran. They're very ecumenical in how they approach. They wanted to bring back in the Protestants after the 400th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation back in 2017. So they're not going to have any qualms bringing everybody together. I mean, for them, it's not going to be any skin off their teeth. So that's the vacuum that's going to be filled. It's going to be with that religious system. Imagine an all-encompassing ecumenical religion that's aided by artificial intelligence, advanced technology like the world's never seen, and you have these supernatural beings showing up saying, hey, we're your space brothers, or we seeded this planet millions of years ago, or whatever they're going to say. And yeah, we got rid of all those pesky Christians because they were causing problems. And people are going to buy into this. They're going to believe it because we've been so conditioned for the last 200 years to not believe in the supernatural. When it actually shows up, it's going to blow people's minds. They're like, like this has got to be real. So I think that's how that all plays out with Russia, Gog and Magog. And I guess the whole point with all of that was to say that in these vacuums, something is going to fill these vacuums. And I believe that's where we see Bible prophecy. We're going to see the fulfillment of those things, of a one world religious system that will tolerate anything except for exclusivity. Anything that says, hey, we're the only way, that's going to be done away with. So that means that the tribulation saints, when they are coming to faith after the rapture of the church, because they saw the rapture, they saw what happened, they've been warned prior to, they're like, oh man, that was real, that was true. And then they're going to convert, and they're going to make other converts, and they're not going to want to bend the knee to the beast kingdom as well. And just like those cartels that are going to be taken out by the rider on the red horse in the beast kingdoms, the system of the beast, these tribulation saints are as well. They're just going to be beheaded. They're going to be shunned, excluded. Every time a new kind of technology comes out, right, or a new, like the vaccine that happened a couple of years ago, everything comes out, it's always voluntary at first. Yeah, you should take the shot. It's good. It's going to help you out, blah, blah, blah. And then after a while, once you get to that 50% mark, then everything starts becoming mandatory. Once you got a 50% of the population or a majority of the population to do one particular thing, then they make whatever that thing is mandatory. And then the mandatory becomes further and further and further extreme in terms of like, yeah, you need to take the shot, or you can't come in our store. All right, you're going to need to take the shot, or we're going to have to let you go from your job. You don't take the shot, yeah, I'm sorry, we're going to have to sequester you in one of these detention centers over here because you're not safe for the general population. You can see where that all goes, right? It always starts off as voluntary, and then it becomes mandatory at some point once they have the majority of people on board. And that's how it's going to be with this beast kingdom that's coming. We see it being built right before our very eyes. All this stuff with central bank digital currencies, just the globalization of everything, the way that the internet has now opened the entire world up, and now the entire world is capable of being run by one particular organization. What they need is the forcing functions inside of this beast kingdom. We have what we see right now with the beast kingdom is the potential, and we're seeing the infrastructure, and now we're looking at where the forcing functions coming in. Are we going to force everybody to use digital currency? Are we going to force everybody to do this? Are we going to force everybody to do that? That's where they're running into the problem. And so that I named tonight the falling apart is because the old order of things is falling apart, and the new system is not yet put in place. We're in this kind of limbo right now between the way the world was and the way the world's going to become. And it's incredibly disturbing in a lot of ways. And I can't even imagine, I was kind of harping on the younger generations earlier, but I can't even imagine being 20 right now, because if you're not a Christian, right, and you don't know anything about Bible prophecy, what have you got to look forward to? I mean, the U.S. is in 38 trillion in debt. The nation is incredibly polarized. I mean, to the point of almost Civil War era time, polarization. We have countries collapsing around the world. We've got terrorist groups. We've got cyber terrorism. We've got, on and on and on. All the things that the world's currently worried about. On the weight of all that weight of the world is on the shoulder of these kids, this next generation. They're like, we don't even know how to ride a bike, because we're not allowed to go outside by ourselves anymore because of how dangerous it is, even in our own neighborhoods. So it's just like you can see why they're so nihilistic. They were born during the war on terror, or right around the time of 9/11. So, and then they had to live through the 2008 recession. So right as the time that some of them, if they were born in the 90s, would have been old enough to like buy a house. Now, I mean, it's completely out of their price range. They're graduating from colleges where their degrees are basically worthless because now AI can do all that stuff. Even the jobs that they were told you need to go into computer science, you need to go into coding, you know that. And now AI is doing all that stuff. So you have a bunch of people now that are going to become really, like Yuval Noah Harari mentioned a long time ago in one of his speeches, useless eaters, right? So how do you keep these people engaged and how do you keep them as productive members of society? The only way I can think of that, they're going to be able to do that going into the future with so much of the workforce now being replaced with artificial intelligence or with robotics or whatever, is a universal basic income. And that ties back in with the whole mark of the beast system, because everybody in the whole world is going to be dependent upon this system in order to buy or sell. So we're seeing the world being channeled in that direction. It reminds me of that. I don't watch Alex Jones a lot, and hardly ever really, but I remember years ago, this was 2020 maybe. I was driving and I heard it on the radio on whatever the channel it was on. So I wasn't looking at any of the videos of it. I was just listening to it on the radio, and I didn't even know who it was at first. And all you hear in the background is the music, as you hear the drum beats. Doom, 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 doom. This was like somebody just banging like a leather drum, like an old tribal drum. And this narrator is talking, and he's talking about how in the ancient times, the cavemen or whatever, or Indians or whatever he was talking about, how they would hunt woolly mammoth. And they basically would align like a canyon, or they'd get on the high ground here, and they would basically somehow get these mammoths to go and start getting them to stampede. And they would get them channeled into this like little canyon area. And on the top of the canyon, everybody was beating drums and yelling and, making all kind of noise and keeping the woolly mammoths like discombobulated and just frantic. And basically, a guy with a spear or a bow and arrow is not going to be able to kill a mammoth. So what do? They cause these mammoth herds to drive themselves or run themselves off of a cliff. And they basically just get them all, they line the channel, and this basically like they would end where the cliff fell off, and all of these mammoths or elephants and stuff would be running off the edge of the cliff and killing themselves. And that's how they would kill them. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing today in terms of like the Hegelian dialectic, where you have the problem reaction problem, or problem reaction solution scenario, where we have this end state where we want to take the world, and now we got to generate all this craziness and chaos, and people are going to cry out for peace and safety or peace and security, and then they're going to come in and say, here's your peace and safety, here's your peace and security. It's called the mark whatever they're going to call it, right? And it's going to solve all your problems. And so people are going to just buy into this hook, line, and sinker. So to me, that's, I don't know, I don't believe in cavemen per se. I believe people lived in caves, but not like Neanderthals or anything like that. But how they hunted is probably pretty similar across any of the indigenous peoples around the world, where if they needed to hunt big game like that and they didn't have the tools to kill them, they had the intellect to drive these animals to kill themselves, jumping off cliffs or running them off cliffs or whatever. And so all that to say is that I feel like that's the way the world is going right now, because the drum beats are just beating, boom, 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 boom. And everybody's frantic, and everybody's kind of running in this direction and running in that direction. And watching the news footage from the airport in Puerto Vallarta, you see people running the airport, and they're running in one particular direction. And I was just thinking, like, if I was in that airport, I guess I would ask the question, like, why are we running that direction? Who is there at the end of that? We're going to run into more of those guys shooting at us at that end. But people tend to just follow other people, when we start moving in a direction. So we're kind of herd animal-like in that sense, is that we'll kind of just follow the crowd, not knowing where that crowd is actually going to end up at. Sorry, man. I've been dialoguing this whole time, or monologuing rather. All right. In Europe, still, you have the internal tensions within the United Kingdom. You have this Rupert Lowe came out with this new party, the Restore Party, that's going to be probably taking the wind out of the sails of the Reform Party, and also challenging the Labour Party over this unchecked immigration, the Islamization of the United Kingdom. And I can see the one thing one thing I know about people, right, is that the UK has become so draconian in how they are censoring everybody and throwing people in jail for memes and tweets and even standing outside praying silently. The Christians are in great attack and duress there in the United Kingdom. I think that scenario there would be absolutely the same over here in the United States had Tim Walz and Kamala Harris won. I think there would have been a ministry of truth. They would have cracked down on all the social media. It would be very draconian, worse than Biden years, right? So I know that when you remove people's ability to protest peacefully and you remove their voice, and I'm talking about in this instance, a so-called Western civilization, Western, nation that supposedly is the vanguard of free speech and all that. When you remove people's ability to protest and to speak truthfully about whatever the issue is, and you start limiting their ability to express themselves, you're leaving them no other option but violence. So I think if the Restore Party hadn't come along, I think there would have been a great amount of violence in the United Kingdom. And if the current powers that be that are incredibly unpopular in the UK right now, like Keir Starmer and all the mayor of London and all their entourage, if they remove or try to dismantle the Restore Party before it's able to hold a vote, election, whatever, I think you're going to see very much violence in the United Kingdom in the guise of not necessarily a civil war, but more like the IRA, back in the day, homegrown terrorist groups within the fighting against the system there, but not just in Northern Ireland. I think it would be across the United Kingdom writ large. It would be very chaotic. So we should pray that the Restore Party is able to come in, win the elections, take over peacefully, restore normalcy and law and order back to the United Kingdom. Because if you take that away from the people, things are going to just turn violent, and they're going to have to, because there's no other recourse for people to express them. They're yearning for freedom, And you had J.D. Vance last year going over there and basically chastising the Europeans for their abandonment of free speech and human rights. And then this year you had Marco Rubio, go over there and give it one of the best speeches I've ever heard in terms of just laying it all out there and the shared bond between Europe and the United States. And the thing that he said in there that I thought was incredibly, I don't know if it was incredibly prophetic, but it was prophetic to me in the sense that he said that the United States will always be a child of Europe. So then that immediately drew me back to Daniel 2 statue, Nebuchadnezzar statue with the legs of iron representing the Roman Empire, and then the feet of iron mixed with miry clay. We're somewhere in the ankles section there, it seems like. And it's also iron mixed with miry clay that we've got this weak and very strong and very weak coalitions coming together, but they're not bonding together. It's not working just yet. But those ultimately will get expressed in these 10 kings, in the instance of the toes in the statue, or the horns on the beast in Revelation 12 and 13. So these 10 kings will come out wearing the 10 crowns, diadems. They'll be kings without a kingdom per se, and they will rule 1 hour with the beast, and they'll be of one mind. Right? They'll be of the same mind. So whatever this beast kingdom is, whatever it's coming in that regard, they're going to be very unified in their ideology about what they're doing is the only way to do it.
And so that may tie back in with the aliens that are the, you know, fallen angels in this regard. It may tie in with artificial intelligence. Something is going to be a game changer, and they're going to say, this is it. This is how we do it. And they're going to be lock, stock, and barrel. They're going to be bought into whatever this new thing is going on. They're going to be as invested in this and so strong a belief in this, just like the senior ranks of the Third Reich, man, the German Third Reich. Those people really believed. I mean, they were true believers in that Hitler was the man to bring about the 1,000-year Reich, and that in a 1,000-year Reich, you needed buildings that would last for 1,000 years. Albert Speer was, you know, creating these massive, you know, structures that were built all with the idea of ruin value attached to them, that in 1,000 years, these buildings would still be beautiful. Just like the Greeks, you know, the ancient statues and the architecture that we see from the ancient Greeks and the Romans that are still standing. They wanted that for this new German Reich that was supposed to last for 1,000 years. But the true believers in the Third Reich, I mean, they were like, that was the religion. They, you know, Adolf Hitler was their Messiah. That they were truly bought into that system. They were willing to die for that. Same thing with what is coming with the Beast Kingdom. These guys are going to be of one mind. Whatever we know right now, the leaders of the world are not of one mind. They can't agree on anything. They can't even get along. But whatever the Beast Kingdom uses in terms of what cements their ideology together, it may be from the mark itself. There may be technology embedded in this mark of the beast that kind of controls them. I don't know exactly. None of us know exactly what the mark of the beast is going to be just yet. We just know that the technology exists today. We know that the infrastructure, the global infrastructure, is being built today. It's kind of like when debit cards first came out. You know, not everywhere you went had a little card reader. You know, some places had it. Some people still had those old machines where you had to like, and you get the paper copy, the ink copy or whatever on there. I remember having to do that for years, and paying for gas or whatever. You know, nobody had those little machines. Very few places had those machines that you could just, you know, stick your card in and read it and all that kind of stuff. I think we're seeing the debit card being developed now, and what's going to come about is going to be the infusion of the technology to embed that into the human body, some kind of the cyber physical connection there, and then the infrastructure within the world would have to be able to receive that mark, the information on that mark. So NFC type stuff, so near field communications. So now when we go, we see it today, and we might even use it today when you go hold your phone up next to something, the machine that reads the card, or whatever, you can just hold your phone up next to it and it automatically deducts your money, or you can just tap your card. You don't have to stick it in or swipe it or anything like that. That's that NFC, near field communication. So it just picks it up. Places in Europe, you know, that have, I know they had commercials for this. I can't remember if the guy had some kind of a chip in his hand or he was wearing something, but he basically walks in the door of the grocery store, takes whatever he wants, and just leaves. And it automatically deducts from his bank account as soon as he walks back out through the door. It automatically picks it up. So the mark of the beast will have that kind of, I think, usability for the average person. It's just going to be picked up everywhere they go. And the same thing with the beheading. You know, we know in Revelation, well, in Revelation 20, we know that it's mentioned that there's going to be these tribulation saints that are beheaded, that were beheaded during the tribulation. And we always just thought that was guillotines, that it was, you know, it was Islam, because they like to use swords and like to cut people's heads off. I think these could be little drones, little micro drones, that if they're constantly just buzzing around or they're sitting dormant in places, you know, and you're Joe Schmo walking down the street and your friend's with you and they have the mark and you don't, that machine and everywhere those sensors all along that path that you're walking are going to be able to figure out very quickly that he has the mark, he's safe, but you don't. And you're now an enemy target. One of those little drones this big that has just enough of an explosive shape charge inside of it can fly down and just target your head, and boom, your head's gone. it could be that. I mean, we don't know. It just means that there's so many different ways that this could all play out now. Whereas before, 20, 30 years ago, we didn't even know how it could happen. And now there's so many different ways that it can happen. We don't know which way it's going to happen. We just know that it all exists now. We went from having no options to now having too many options. We don't know which way it's going to be. Also in Europe, you have the populist movements rising up. Populist governments that say, no, we're not going to take any of your immigrants. And if we have them, we're going to start kicking them out. So Denmark, Poland, Hungary, Italy, Greece, to a certain extent, they're beginning to push back on this open door policy into Europe from the third world. And it's become so destabilizing across so many areas that all of this mamby-pamby, kumbaya, let's all, the whole world, there's no borders, we all live together in peace and harmony, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that doesn't work. And I think Europeans are finally kind of waking up to that. And what was interesting about the Marco Rubio speech, going back to Munich, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago, was he got a standing ovation at the end of it. And it was so, in terms of like the gist, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. But he was like basically telling these European leaders, like, you should not, why are you ashamed of your history? You have nothing to do with your history. You weren't there. You weren't doing it. You have a long and glorious history. You guys need to like stand up. You're about to lose your culture, you're about to lose your way of life forever. And I think in that speech, there was a click in there somewhere with some of those leaders that it could have been that little spark that will now lead to what I think will become this revived Roman Empire. And I do believe that, for example, like talking about the 10 kings, I still believe that in the sense of the regions, that those will be regional powers under some kind of overarching imperial system, which is the beast system. In Europe, Rome, what you think about the old Roman Empire, that will become a region, right? The Mediterranean region to include Northern Europe. And that will be one region. And inside of that, they end up becoming the dominant region out of all the other regions. And so that's where the headquarters seems to be based out of, at least for the first part of the tribulation. And then that's where we talk about the revived Roman Empire, is that it seems to encompass the old boundaries or borders of the old Roman Empire. And if you take, for example, there's an organization called the Union for the Mediterranean that encompasses all the nations that currently border the Mediterranean Sea, to include Israel, Turkey, and other Arab nations and Egyptian nations. It's one of the only organizations I can think of right now that Israel is, the Jews and Arabs, or Jews and Muslims in there together, aside from like the United Nations. But like this one is like, this has been around since 2005. And if you look at their map of the nations involved in that, and you add in like NATO and the EU, it's the Roman Empire made over. I mean, it's exactly the same borders of the old Roman Empire. So it seems like there's some kind of emerging there that Europe also encompasses the Mediterranean, and they end up becoming the dominant region at that point. And whoever the leader is that comes out of that will be, in my opinion, he'll be like the European version of Donald Trump. He will be their version of that guy. And I think that whoever that guy is, he will be the Antichrist. And we don't know who that is just yet, but there is a lot of contenders out there for sure. And I don't think, I mean, as much as I see like Jared Kushner being a really, really strong candidate for the Antichrist, he still may be. He's not European necessarily, but his parents were. So I don't know. Again, it's fun to speculate on all this stuff, but we're just not going to know until we're not going to know until after the rapture of the church happens. Okay. East and South Asia, China. So I don't know if any of y'all pay attention to what's going on in China, but last month, Xi Jinping, so Xi Jinping is the head of the Communist Party there. They have at the very upper echelon of the Communist Party a select committee, I think is what they're called. And it's these 7 senior Politburo members that are friends, hand select picks of Xi Jinping. So generally what would happen is when a new leader comes into power in China, they will take the old members of that Politburo or that committee or whatever, and they'll replace them with people that are loyal to them, people that they know personally. And so, Xi's been in power for a while now. And so this committee of 7 is all been hand selected by Xi. And Xi himself, though, is not a general. A lot of these men in there are generals, so they have direct control over their militaries. And they are 2 of them were incredibly popular in terms of like loyalty from the troops. They were very loyal to these 2 particular generals, and I can't say their names off the top of my head. But the one that was removed, or there's 2 removed, but the deal with the committee is that part of their rules was that no member from that committee can be removed without the majority of the committee agreeing to it. And Xi just disappeared 2 of these guys like overnight. And what we saw then was about the closest thing we've seen to a military revolt since Tiananmen Square, which even that wasn't a military revolt. That was like the people, students and protesters or whatever, rising up. But in this sense, it seems like there was military movements within China that seemed to be positioning themselves against Xi, and then Xi had his own forces surrounding his capital there. So there was a bit of I don't know where that ended up with, where that went, but Xi seems to have lost a lot of his confidence in being the sole power in China. And I don't know if these generals that he disappeared, I don't know if they're dead, alive, don't know. But the committee was pissed off because, hey, we're supposed to agree on this together, and you just unilaterally made this decision. You violated the rules. So now the rules that govern how China rules itself, Xi is directly just like, yeah, I don't care about the rules. I'm going to do what's best for me. So I don't know how much longer Xi has in that position. And he is in his 70s, so he's not a spring chicken either. So I think potentially, and this is maybe a shot in the dark, but if China does collapse in on itself, or if China, because of the outer tensions, we've got China boxed in on the Pacific with South Korea, Japan, which is now becoming militarized again and is still an ally of the U.S., the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, even Vietnam to an extent, because Vietnam is not on good terms with China necessarily. You have all these hostile nations on China's eastern flank, which is what caused them to want to do the Belt and Road Initiative. It wanted them to do I think it's the String of Pearls, where they control all these ports along, all throughout the world's trading routes, and they control the ports. And so they were trying to do that because they were boxed in on the Pacific side. And a lot of the tensions between Philippines and China and Vietnam and Taiwan, et cetera, is because China wants to claim all that ocean as theirs, or exclusive economic zones. And Philippines like, no, that's our land. That's our area. You can't have our fishing areas and our mining and oil rights and all that kind of stuff. So we've got them boxed in on the eastern flank. And now on the western flank, you have basically nations that are exactly their best buddies either. India, which is now the most populous nation on the planet. You got Pakistan, which, China's done terrible things to the Uyghur population there in Western China, which is a Muslim Chinese. And so I don't know how Pakistan feels about that. Pakistan is having issues right now with the Taliban. They're conducting military raids into Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban. Taliban's threatening to respond. So that place is in a hot mess. And then Pakistan is a nuclear powered country. So India, Pakistan both have nuclear weapons. They're not friendly with each other. I mean, it's volatile in that part of the world in every direction for China. But if China collapses, something that puts China in a box or constrains them, maybe Xi does pass away, could be from natural causes, could be from a coup d'etat, or whatever happens. China could be in a bad way for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, but something seems to happen at the midpoint where now they are reasserting themselves, and now we start to see the whole kings of the East being gathered together to march against the Antichrist. And then once they move over that direction, they end up getting turned to fight against Jesus Christ. So they're just one of the armies, or part of the armies that make up that final Armageddon campaign. So something seems to sideline China for the time being, and they seem to be set aside, and they will come back into play at the second half of the tribulation. So between now and the rapture, I don't know that China will take a chance at taking Taiwan out, because it will come at a very heavy cost that I don't know if they're willing to pay yet. And it may also play out with Iran too, because I know that they're supporters of Iran. They were supporters of Venezuela. So was Russia. But Russia's looking to look. I mean, Russia recognizes these faults that China has with regard to their ailing economy. They have a huge demographic problem. Their population's aging out, and they don't have enough women to help produce the next generation. So you have a ton of young men who have no prospect of ever getting married and having a family, very disproportionately so. And then on top of that, young people, that generation, the ones I mentioned earlier, the millennials and the Gen Z, I guess it is, they don't even they're protesting silently and revolting silently by not working, not reproducing, not doing anything, because they're like, what's the point? The whole buy law and let it rot thing. They don't see a point in contributing to China anymore, so they're just going to do the very bare minimum. So it seems like China gets sidelined, at least from today through the midpoint of the tribulation, and then they're able to come back, and they're rolled up in these kings of the East that come marching against the West at that point. We have in the world going on today a lot of political divisions and even secessionist movements. So in Canada, Alberta is looking to secede from the rest of Canada. I think British Columbia, Manitoba could follow, depending on what happens with Alberta. And I think that's again, going back to this whole technate map, where they just get rolled up into the North American region. But right now, Albertans are very angry with the government there in Ottawa, because basically Ottawa takes their money, takes their wealth, and doesn't give anything in return, and then also hamstrings their ability to make money and to make a living, and making it very difficult for the people out west to live. You had who was their other? They had their who was the guy before Carney? The pretty boy guy. I can't believe I'm forgetting that guy's name. But yeah, so you basically have these Trudeau. Thank you, Yvonne. Justin Trudeau, who was as incompetent as the day is long, in the middle of the summer. I mean, that guy was absolutely incompetent. But the whole fiasco that he did with basically freezing people's payments and stuff when they were kind of protesting the border policies for vaccines and all that. I mean, I think that was what triggered that whole movement going forward, and that along with just the economic duress that the Eastern Canada has put on Western Canada, is what's going to cause this division. I do think it'll happen. I do think Alberta will break away. I don't know what that looks like. I don't think they're joining the United States per se. They may be an independent, but if Trump has his way, he will definitely recognize them right off the bat and begin to support them once they're an independent movement, especially if Carney and the rest of the government there in Ottawa want to go to turn to China, as their most favored nation status or whatever. So I do see Alberta breaking apart, or Canada breaking apart with that. You have other independence movements, like I mentioned earlier, the Restore Party there in the United Kingdom. You have you've got secessionist movements within the U.S. I mean, you're going to look at states like California, especially if the midterms goes to the Republicans, like I think it will. You're going to see a lot of the, and especially if it looks like the gig is up for the Democrats, like if they recognize, like, okay, Trump's cut off all of our backdoor funding through USAID and all these NGOs and all the slush funds and all the fraud that had just been rampant through all the blue states, and some of the red states. Once all that money gets secured and removed from the Democratic coffers, what you're left with is the billionaire philanthropists that are like the Soros, Singh. I think his name is Jeffrey Reed, the guy that co-founder of LinkedIn. All these billionaire guys that are pumping money to these left-wing agitators. Even Gavin Newsom, California, they just got caught. They were directing money, taxpayer money, into these leftist organizations like Churla. And those were the folks out there burning police cars and starting riots and doing all that stuff. So once all this money gets turned off, it's almost the same situation you have with these cartels. I mean, once you're in that once your back's against the wall, you get very desperate, right? And a desperate thing is going to be a dangerous thing, right? Because they don't have anything to lose at this point. So I think if they lose the midterms, things in the U.S. could get very dicey because they don't have any other course but violence, right? Their arguments suck because their arguments aren't based in reality, right? Men can be women, women can be men, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. None of that's based in reality. And that's why it doesn't work. And it's not sustainable. And if that's your argument, and your argument's getting shut down in reality, and it's getting shut down in the news, it's getting shut down in politics because the reality those people are living in isn't real and it doesn't exist, and you can't sustain it, and you can't, and nobody wants to live under that chaos and lunacy. What are they going to do? They're going to get violent. They're going to get violent, just like these cartel guys. When you cut off all their money, you cut off their ability to traffic, do their business of trafficking drugs and people, they're going to get violent, and they're going to get increased because they're increasingly becoming more and more desperate. So I think the U.S. could get very in that situation. You could have states like, I don't know every state's constitution, so I don't know what they need for each particular state to secede, for example, from the U.S. They talk about it. They've been talking about it for a long time, but it's always when a Republican comes in that they want, or talk. These Democrat-run states are always talking about secession, but you've got parts of states that want to secede from, like I think it's Western Washington wants to secede from Eastern Washington, or maybe it's Oregon. Eastern or Western Oregon wants to secede from Western Oregon. So you've got groups within states, within a nation, that want to secede from each other and break apart. Manhattan wants to break away from New York City, and that actually is not that far afield, because there are cities that actually have broken apart and done that in the past. So it's not like that can't happen. Um, the I guess the head of whoever is over Manhattan per se, once Mamdani came in and he started doing all this, they're like, yeah, we want to separate from New York City. We don't want any part of that. So it's interesting to see what how that plays out with the rest of the remainder of Trump's terms or time in office. Let's see here. Okay, let's talk in this last section because I'm already at holy crap, I'm at 2 hours. I haven't even got the questions yet. Let me finish with this. The last two things. So UFOs and AI. So we have Trump announced just recently, February 19th, that he's going to direct the federal agencies to include the Department of War to begin identifying and releasing records related to UFOs, UAPs, and aliens, citing public interest. This is after Obama had done the interview and saying, yeah, they're real. I hadn't seen them, but they're real. Not to be outdone, Trump's like, all right, well, let's just declassify everything. So I'm curious to how this will play out. And I'm curious to like what the reaction is going to be. Most of us would say, yeah, we already knew that these things are up there flying around. We would call them fallen angels, demons, whatever. The non-Christian world will call them aliens or whatever, ancient astronauts or something. And so as these things are beginning to be brought into light, brought into the public discussion, and evidence is being presented, whatever the evidence is that they have that they've kept classified all these years, I'm curious as to how that's going to shake the faith of many within Christendom. And I think like our groups, people that are watching for the soon return of Jesus Christ, that are understanding Bible prophecy, that are grounded in creation, basically just in the Bible itself, that believe and trust in the Bible, are going to be okay in the sense that we're going to recognize these things for what they are. They're fallen angels. They're interdimensional beings that aren't bound by our laws of our universe and our reality. So they're able to come and go and at will break the laws of physics and break the laws of our reality. And the only beings that we know of that can do that are angels, whether they're fallen or holy angels, demons. And I distinguish between demons and fallen angels. I think that's it. Those are those kinds of beings that God has created that aren't bound by our reality. Everything else is bound in our reality. So I don't know how this plays out across Christendom. Like I said, I think we would recognize it for what it is, but like pulpits across the United States, let's just say this week, like tomorrow, something comes out and it's undeniably not human, and it's not AI, it's not faked, it's legit, like thousands of witnesses, everything, and it's not Project Bluebeam or anything. It's like a real thing that they're able to see. If they're able to bring out that kind of convincing evidence, what would that really do to many of the churches across America? I know within the Catholic faith, they're okay with there being aliens and calling them aliens and believing that they're extraterrestrial beings from some other part of the galaxy or whatever. The Catholic Church has even said, hey, well, let's baptize them, So I think that could be another huge division point within Christendom, where Christians are divided, just like we've divided over Israel since October 7th, 2023. That was a huge division that we've seen, this rift that's opened up in Christendom. Those that recognize the prophetic significance of Israel back in her land, that signaling the last days, etc. And the vast majority of churches who don't think there's anything significant, prophetic or otherwise, with Israel coming back as a nation. They're not even the real Jews of the Bible, according to them, right? So there was a division, there was a rift that happened with the October 7th event, right? The massacre there on October 7th. I think this could be another rift point, where you're going to have a lot of churches divided on this. Hey, like you're not whatever. If that's what this evidence is, and if that's what this evidence presents in terms of being undeniable, in the sense that it wasn't faked, it's whatever. I think it could be another rift point like that, where the church it's whatever it is, all this stuff that's happening is designed specifically to tear the church apart. The body of Christ, all this stuff that's happening is designed to tear the church apart, because Satan is currently the God of this world and running this world. So he's got to weaken the church and weaken the church and weaken the church. We're the true objects of his, focal point to destroy us, because we're the ones that have the truth in us. So if he can diminish our influence, then it makes his job all the easier. Now, again, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys. What do you think will happen across churches? Let's say this week, some undeniable alien evidence is presented, fallen angel evidence is presented. What do you think the next Sunday pulpits are going to be talking about, and the Sunday after that, and the Sunday after that? And kids, teenagers watching this on YouTube and TikTok and whatever, how are they going to be impacted by this? So that's where I think the significance comes. It's going to be a rift. It's an event that causes a further rift of the church. Okay, now lastly, on to AI. And I saw this quote in a John Lennox. I don't know if you've seen him. He's I think he's Scottish. No, Irish. I think he's an Irish mathematician, a PhD, incredibly genius guy. Love listening to him talk. And he's focused a lot here recently on the last days and technology and all that kind of stuff. So definitely worth listening to. But he had this quote in one of his presentations, and I thought it was incredible. I thought, man, this is it. Like, this encapsulates where we are today. It's by E.O. Wilson. Let's see, pull over here. He says, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have a Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Until we answer those huge questions of philosophy, we are on thin ground. And those questions of, like, who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? To me, that's where we're at right now. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. I mean, and we have the most morally debased global generation since the days of Noah. So there you have it. We have all this amazing technology, but we're also probably the least worthy of wielding it. You've got AI is probably going to be taking a lot of jobs over in the next couple of years. I think this is going to be profound. Whatever you think about AI, whatever people are talking about, I think in terms of pragmatism, what is the practical nature of AI becoming more and more advanced? It's going to be taking people's jobs, point blank. If you're in a white collar job, or you're in a job that involves crunching data or working on computers like I do, your job is probably in jeopardy, because AI is going to very quickly be able to do that stuff. Now, it's not there just yet, but at the rate at which things are moving, it's exponential. These leaps and bounds in AI are exponential. So think about where we are today in February, beginning of 2026, in terms of AI, and just know, if we're still here, Lord willing, where we are at the end of 2026, where AI is at that point, and how much it will have advanced in that 1 year. And I think you'll see very soon that a lot of people's jobs are not going to be safe anymore. China has all these, I don't know if you saw their video, the humanoid robots that were out there doing kung fu and marching and all that stuff, shooting weapons. Like, that was real. That wasn't AI. That wasn't faked. That is terrifying. Bunch of Terminators, Anyways. All right. I have I have more, but I think I'm going to stop for there for now. Okay. All right. Let me move to question and answer. And thank you, moderators, for policing all these up. All right. And Elizabeth, I got your message, and definitely will be praying for your back, pain in your back. All right, questions. Let's try and go through these fairly quickly. From Donna, the Bible talks of us loving our brothers and sisters in quite a few places. All our people are brothers and sisters, or just fellow believers in different love for non-believers or the haters. So I do think it's everybody, right? Yeah. Who is your neighbor? Kind of thing, where Jesus was talking about, or even the parable of the Good Samaritan. So I do think that we should show love to everybody, but loving somebody is not the same thing as capitulating to everything that they want. I love my children, but I am not going to capitulate to every wish and demand that they get, because it's not good for them, especially for the things that aren't good for them. So that doesn't mean I don't love them, and I think that we treat other people that way, with a general kind of love, that they're another human made in the image of God, that we should show that kind of love to them. However, and this is not like here's the answer, but this and this, these are the exceptions. I'm not saying there's exceptions to that. I do think that there are people that, Jesus also said that when you go into a town or village and they reject your message, you shake the sandal off your shoes and you move on. And there's going to be people like that in your life that you share the gospel with, or you try and present certain truths to them, and they reject those things, then you've done your part, you've shared. Your job is not to convert them. Your job is simply to share with them out of love. But then you move on. You're not going to stay there and keep throwing your pearls before swines, kind of thing, where you just keep arguing over and over and over with the same people that refuse to accept what the Bible actually teaches. Like this guy that emailed me. I'm going to waste the next 3 months arguing with him when he has no intention of changing his position, regardless of what evidence I present. Okay, you know what? If you want to believe pre-wrath, I wish people were raptured according to their eschatology. I think that that's fair. If you want to be post-trib, I think you should have to go all, but that's not up to me. That's God's not that petty. I guess I am that petty, but he is not. All right. Patrick Hart. Were post-flood giants a body for the disembodied Nephilim spirit to inhabit, a vessel made with fallen angel technology like Nimrod becoming Gibborim? So in Genesis 6:4, we read that there were giants. Let's read it. Butcher it. Okay. Let me start here as a baseline so I can go from there. This is Genesis 6:4. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, when they and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. So that word when is, again, that is that word asher in the Hebrew. It can mean when or whenever. And I think the English when doesn't do it justice or doesn't clarify it as much as it should be clear. So when I reread it with the whenever, it makes a lot more sense. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, whenever the sons of God came into the daughters of men. So it doesn't seem like the incursion was limited to a one-time event. But here's the difference between the pre-flood and post-flood. The pre-flood generation seemed like they were all, I don't know if we lived on a supercontinent at the time, or people generally were together in these massive, if the continents were all together, all connected, right? And Satan was like, well, we need to contaminate the human race so that this Messiah can't come out of the people. There's a Messiah that's supposed to come out of these people that's going to destroy me. I need to prevent that. So if that's the way it happened, and that's the way that was Satan's intent, I'm not going to say it's 100% that's what it was. I'm saying it seems very logical to me that he is going to try and remove the opportunity for Jesus to ever come. Now, he didn't know it was going to be Jesus, but whoever this one was that was going to crush his head, and he was going to try and prevent that. That's the only prophecy that he knew up until that point, was the one given there in the garden when God is cursing Adam, Eve, and then the serpent, who was at that time possessed. Satan was possessing that form. That somebody was going to come out of the race of man and was going to destroy him. So for the next 1,500 or 1,656 years, according to the genealogies, if we take all the genealogies and time them out, it's 1,656 years from Adam to Noah, or to the flood. Satan, at a certain point, was, I guess, trying to craft a plan on how to prevent that from happening. And I got to imagine at this point in time that Satan doesn't know the world's going to go on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. He's like us in the sense that we're not omnipotent. We don't know, or not. We weren't omniscient. He doesn't know everything. He can't be everywhere at the same time. He's only limited to what's in front of him at that time. So he begins to genetically, he talks these fallen angels into coming down, however many there were, and contaminating the human race. And I have a theory on this. It's kind of gross, but I think, I don't know how real it is. It makes sense in my mind, but set aside the whole biology of an angel, right? So we know that angels can take on human form. It says that in Hebrews, that you be careful, entertaining strangers, because sometimes you'll have entertained angels unaware. We know in the Old Testament that angels can appear as men, like the two that came to take Lot and his family out of Sodom. We know that the people of Sodom, the men of Sodom, were wanting to have their way carnally with them. So we know that the angels that met with Abraham ate. So apparently they can, I don't want to get into the whole biology of angels, because I don't know what that is. Nobody knows what that is specifically, but they have the ability to take on human form, right? Presumably, and this is a presumption, that would include a lot of the inner workings of the body. So if they're in their biological form, they are able to produce sperm. My thought was that if those angels were going around and they're incredibly handsome, attractive, they must have appeared godlike to the antediluvian peoples at the time, that they could have slept with thousands of women. One angel could have. And if he were to release inside of her, that could have contaminated her, because we know that the DNA, RNA, all that stuff, a lot of that attaches to the female, right? And in some way, she doesn't have to give birth at that time. It could be like, and I hate to put it like this, but it's like almost like a fallen angel STD, you know, that they have from now on, that those people are contaminated with this particular DNA, RNA, whatever it is now a part of their body, and it's, you know, attached itself to their DNA structure, some way, shape, or form. So with that said, I think that fallen angels did a lot of this, and by the time from the days of Jared, which I believe, I think you read the book of Enoch, 1 Enoch, that's when these angels began coming down doing these things, or these watchers were coming down doing these things, that you had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before the flood would happen. So Jared was, I think Jared was Enoch's father. Am I not mistaken? Yeah, so Jared was Enoch's father. And then Enoch lived for 365 years. But at 65 years, he had Methuselah, and then Lamech, and then Noah. So from Noah, or from Jared, you had, I don't know, probably 600 or 700 years that this could have gone on. So by the time that the flood happens, you have a ton of these giants. First of all, they're these giants they're roaming on the earth and causing havoc and chaos, etc. But then you have the general contamination of the women, and then those women would have children. Their children would be contaminated, etc., etc. So it's not to say that everyone that was contaminated with this angelic STD, if I can call it that, it's that they're not pure anymore in terms of their bloodline, DNA, etc. So that's why Noah was called, he was pure in his generations, and not that he was a perfect in his generations. It's not that he was perfect, sinless man, just he wasn't contaminated by whatever that was going on. And with that said, the intent was to contaminate the human race. But now after the flood, you have Noah, his sons, his wife, and then the daughter-in-laws. They begin having children. And within about 200 years, there was enough of a population that they were not spreading out and reclaiming the earth, you know, filling the earth. But then they were gathered near the Fertile Crescent there, near, I think Babel was up near southeastern Syria, the northwestern border of Iraq, southeastern Syria. And they would have at that time been scattered. They're building the Tower of Babel. God scatters them, separates them by language. And then afterwards, you have these, it seems like there's another reappearance of these fallen angels come down, or another group of them, or what have you, come down. And their we don't know what their judgment was, but like the effect that they wanted to do now doesn't work anymore, because now people are scattered. People are different cultures, different languages. There's no unity amongst mankind. They're not all, you know, united under language and purpose. So now when these giants are showing up, it seems like they were manifesting themselves, or really kind of inhabiting the land of Canaan until the Hebrews came in. The Israelites came in, defeated them in a number of different places, and then drove them out. They went from there to Crete, from Crete to Cyprus, or Cyprus and then to Crete, and then on into Europe, and then over to the Americas, because we see giants, you know, these megalithic structures. We see burial mounds in Ohio. We've got, you know, similar megalithic structures all over the Cyclopean type structures all over the world. And we still today don't know how people did it, you know? So I tend to think that those were built by giants, that they had super strength, and they were a lot bigger. They had some probably help from fallen angels to craft and do the things that they were doing, manipulate material, or use acoustics to levitate rocks to move. They were far beyond what normal humans would have been able to do at that time, in terms of just cutting these massive stones perfectly cut them. I don't know if you've seen those ones in South America that L.A. Marzulli has gone down and done all those archaeological excavations. They're not excavations, but documentaries, and going there and discussing them. But you see those stones that are cut so perfectly that there's no gap between them, no nothing. You can't slide a piece of paper between them. And then you've got the stones that are carved in such a way that they fit perfectly in this niche, and the other stone is carved perfectly so that stone fits. It's crazy. So to me, it seems like that there was a second incursion after the flood. However, this time around, the people were so scattered at this point, and they're so disparate in their worldviews and what they thought. A lot of them were hostile to giants, because the giants came in and began cannibalizing them, and they were like, "Yeah, we're not putting up with that." Just like the native Indian tribes, or Americans in before Columbus and all that time, seemed to be, they tolerated them living there for a while, but once those guys started eating their people, they banded together and basically wiped those giants out. So I do think that there was a second incursion, yet it wasn't as effective. It wasn't effective at all, really, like it was pre-flood days. And not only that, but the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim from before the flood, the ones that died in the flood, that those now make up the demonic host, or at least part of them make up those disembodied spirits, because now they don't have bodies anymore. Their bodies perished in the flood, yet they're not human and they're not fully angel. They're kind of this mix between the two. So they just wander the earth until the last day, when they're going to be cast into the lake of fire. So that's my opinion on that. I tend to look at demons as being distinct from fallen angels, in the sense that a fallen angel is still an angel, and an angel can manifest physically. They don't need to possess anybody. They can just appear as in their physical form, whatever that form is. Whereas a demon cannot. A demon has to inhabit something, or someone rather, and in order to, I don't know, mimic life or take over, take possession of. All right. Man, that was a long-winded answer. Sorry. Always room for one more. Pete, would you please clarify the name of Church of God question? Not sure I heard you correctly, because that's when I came in late. You're referring to Church of God, or one of the many named variants. Thank you. So I was at Walmart. I don't know if you heard the first part of this, but I was at Walmart. I had my headphones in. I was just getting, some just groceries to make dinner and stuff tonight. And, in Europe, people buy a single serving of this, single serving of that, and they shop for the day. I kind of do that here too. So I've just made some soup tonight, which I was making the soup, and it actually tastes pretty good, but I forgot a couple of key ingredients, and it still tastes pretty good. So I'm like, okay, well, next time. But I already cooked it. I was like, crap, I forgot to put in the beans. I forgot to put in the this other ranch powder stuff in there. Okay. So this guy comes up to me, and I take my headphones out, and he's like, hey, would you like to know about the seal of God? And I'm like, the seal of God. And I'm thinking like the 144,000. I'm thinking the Holy Spirit. So I said, are you talking about the Holy Spirit? And he's like, no, I'm talking about Passover. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've never heard this before. He's like, what? Continue. So he starts explaining it to me. And then anyways, all that to say, he just said Church of God. I don't know. Again, I don't know hardly anything about the Church of God. So I'm by no means can speak intelligently about what they believe specifically. I know that they're a denomination. I don't know if there's variations of the Church of God. Maybe there's many variations. That I don't know. If they're all like independent churches, like kind of how the churches of Christ are, each Church of Christ is its own like island. They don't claim to be part of a denomination, yet they are a denomination. when you look them up in the yellow book, yellow pages or whatever, they're listed under the churches of Christ. You can say, okay, there's the East Side Church of Christ, there's the West Side Church of Christ, there's a North Side Church of Christ, South Side. And in those churches of Christ, they generally will believe the same thing, yet they do not call themselves a denomination, and they do not identify themselves in a official body like Southern Baptists do with the Southern Baptist associations or whatever. So that I don't know. I don't know hardly anything about the Church of God. Popel says Church of God is like Assembly of God. So then that means they're charismatic, like talking in tongues and stuff. I don't know if that's what they are. Anyways, that's what happened with that. Okay, Frosty Gal, is the alien agenda coming? Is that when things really take a turn? Like I said earlier, I think that this whole alien disclosure thing that's going to happen between now and the summer, with Steven Spielberg's movie. Arrow Whisper says Church of God is Pentecostal. Mrs. C 6721 Yellow Pages. Pete, that doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean. I'm dating myself. I'm sorry. Okay, so again, I think this alien disclosure, whatever it ends up becoming, is going to become a huge rift point for the church, because you're going to have a lot of churches that are not sound doctrinally, or they're not, they're kind of the name it, claim it, grab it, blab it, seven mountain mandates, all the variations out there. I think a lot of them, I think this is just another dividing point for churches, where unfortunately that's how I think that's going to play out, and it's designed to weaken the church. Just like the Steven Spielberg movie that's coming out this summer, one of the images from the trailer was this. I guess they were talking about, we can't be the only ones out of this entire vast universe. And you've got the nun rubbing the crucifix or holding the crucifix and talking about something that wrecking their faith or whatever. I just think that that's what that's intended to do. Now, Trump, I don't think is intending to do that specifically. I think he's just trying to release this stuff because people want to know about it. But the second and third order effects will be the impact on the church. That guy didn't believe what the Church of God believes. Just a guy. Church of God was in no makeup, no TV. Herbert Armstrong. Okay, you're talking about Herbert Armstrong. Yeah, Armstrongism is its own. I think it's its own thing. But if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Armstrongism, aside from all the other kind of errant things that they believe, I think they believe they're the lost tribes of Israel, like the British Israelism kind of thing. Is that accurate? Like the lost tribes are out of the United Kingdom or something, and I think that's what they're associating, that the lost tribes ended up in England back in the right after Rome collapsed, or Rome conquered Jerusalem in 70 AD. Yeah. Okay. From Brian, can an inanimate object be possessed by demons? I think that they can. Now, I know Britt Gillette does not think that they can. And Britt and I are in John Holler, but we're all in this like group chat, and he talked about his article, kind of highlighting that he did not think that demons can possess inanimate objects. And I said, in the text group chat, I was like, I'm going to have to be the contrarian on this point. I said, I think they can. And I said, I'm going to hand the contrarian hat back over to John Holler. So he knows where I'm at on that. And I think like Britt and like Scott Townsend believe that they can't, but I believe that they can. So again, we're talking about a spirit being that can possess a person. That's the ultimate goal, would be to possess a living being. But that's not to say that they can't possess an inanimate object and manipulate it or whatever, do whatever. It's not like they're possessing it to take over that thing to live in it forever. They're using it as a tool. They're using it to do something with that thing, like a Ouija board or something. You know how I don't know what the piece is in the middle, that thing moves around, like those demonic forces can move those things. I think they can move inside of systems like the internet, you know, or to this point, no, that's going to take too long. Next, I don't know, at some point here in the near future, I'll read chapter 1 of the new book, The Internet is Made of Demons. That's chapter 1. But that chapter is based off an article called The Internet is Full of Demons. And then that article is based off a book called The Internet is Not What You Think It Is. So anyways, all that to say is I think that demon, the word demon in Greek is daemon. It means intelligences. And that's how the Greeks identified these demons, these spirits, as intelligences. I think these things can possess animate and inanimate objects. I don't think there's anything physically that would constrain them from doing that and manipulating those things to whatever ends that they're using them for. Not the internet. The internet is a means of communication. Like right now, I'm looking at this camera and the screen, and you're looking at me from your screen. Yet in reality, you're not really looking at me. You're looking at a bunch of ones and zeros behind the screen that's making the picture that is now my face, and same thing with my voice. So this is it's almost like a mirage, if you will. Like I'm really here and you're really where you are, but the medium through which we see each other and communicate is where all that ones and zeros comes in. But we're not looking at it like ones and zeros, like in the Matrix, you know, where Neo, or, you know, once he becomes the one, he sees everything in ones and zeros, right? Like the walls, everything is green and kind of that DOS green. So I would just say that demonic entities can easily possess a thing to achieve whatever end they're trying to achieve. I don't think that's a stretch at all. But again, like Britt and I can disagree on that, and it's no big deal because, you know, it's not like we break fellowship over that. That's silly. Anyways, okay. From Karen, what about August? What about in August when the Earth is supposed to lose gravity for 7 seconds? Good time for the rapture. Yeah, you know, I heard that. Who knows what kind of stock you put into that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. Until that becomes like a talking point from Caroline Levitt on the, you know, White House saying, hey, on this date, everybody needs to be like grabbing onto something. Like, until it comes to that official, because if it were really true, I think we would be hearing about this from those people saying, hey, this is coming. Y'all need to get ready. Y'all need to staple everything down or tie everything down, or whatever it is. I don't know, but I think that would be something that everybody would be talking about. Ghost to a Ghost. Jack Hibbs told a pretty good witchcraft story on his podcast recently involving inanimate objects having a spirit connected to them. Yeah, I mean, my only real experience with the demonic, I guess, is what happened to me in the hotel room in Kentucky. I mean, many of you have seen that video. I had it on TikTok for a long time. But it didn't possess my computer, but it was speaking through my computer or speaking into my computer. And then I was seeing the shadow on the wall moving back and forth when there shouldn't be a shadow there. But it used that, and my computer captured that image and that thing. But I think that they can move things around. They can manipulate physical matter. They can obviously indwell a pig. A pig's not a human. They can indwell. It seems like they possess houses in a lot of ways. Like when we think about haunted houses, those aren't really ghosts of deceased people. Those are demonic entities that are inhabiting that particular place, haunting that place. But they're able to manipulate physical matter in there. We know that Paul talks about that when people were praying to these wooden idols, they're not praying to the wood itself, to the little idol. They're really praying to the demon attached to that idol. So, from Brooke, question: have they talked about bringing anyone to justice on the Epstein files? Anyone? I'm beside myself that there is no action. It's crazy. I agree. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of the names, but there are so many people named in there that aren't party to what Epstein is doing per se. Like they're just named as somebody that was a lot. I mean, Elvis is named in there. There's a lot of people named in there that had nothing to do with Epstein. Trump had nothing to do with Epstein in terms of like, he broke ties with that guy back in like 2007 or 9 or somewhere in there. And, but Epstein was working against Trump to make sure that he did not win the 20 or whatever the election was, 2016 or 2020. I can't remember which one it was associated with, but he was working against Trump to make sure that he did not get elected because he did not like Trump. So I don't know if there's having to be the separation of that stuff or there's just so much of it up front right now. I saw somebody posted on Facebook about Leonardo DiCaprio was eating babies or something. Like I don't know how much of that is true or how much of that is just a rumor that caught wind and went viral, because if you go back and look for his name or you look for him in those Epstein files, and I haven't done this, I don't think he might be mentioned in there, but we know that he was connected to Diddy. He was going to those Diddy parties and they were doing all kind of like, Sodom and Gomorrah stuff in there. But I'm not saying it's beyond him to do those things. I'm just saying, I don't know what's true nowadays and what's not true. What's just rumor, and fake information, fake news, whatever. So it's so hard to decipher all that stuff out. I imagine at the justice level, it's also kind of that same way where you're trying to decipher between, do you have a valid legal case to bring against this person other than them being mentioned or accused of something? You got to chase all that stuff down. If it were just in the court of public opinion, people would be trashed overnight and done and thrown in jail, tarred and feathered, hung, whatever. But in the legal system that we live in, you got to have a pretty rock solid case to bring against somebody with evidence to back it up, other than just an email. Because if that were the case, they should be locking up like the Clintons, they should be locking up the Podestas, they should be locking up all those folks that have actual ties. Bill Gates, you got to imagine like a guy like Bill Gates, what kind of lawyers he keeps on retainer. Like he's got whole law firms. So it's that, there's that too, there's just a ton. So right now Prince Andrew was the only one that I knew, or no, there was a Norwegian diplomat that also was, I think, arrested that had ties with Epstein. So those are the only two that I know of, but I think it's coming. And I think that we're going to start seeing these names where the cases, there was enough evidence to bring against them. Like I think this week, the Clintons have to go before the Congress and they're going to have to give an account for lying to Congress about ties with Epstein. When I think Hillary said that there was no ties, blah, blah, blah. And now there's all these photos with Bill and Jeffrey in the hot tubs, and all that stuff. So I don't know what they're going to say. I'm just saying that a lot of these people are very powerful, very connected, and just because they're named in there doesn't mean that the FBI can go out and immediately arrest them. I mean, at least my understanding of it is that way. That they have to actually have a case to bring against them that'll hold up in a court of law. Okay. Thank you, Brooke. Jay Hamby, when Jesus says, "Will I find faith on the earth?" When is this? The Jews? So I think that that's talking about when he returns at the rapture. Luke 21, I believe. Not Luke 21. It's the parable of the unjust or the just, the judge. Let's see, it's in 12. Let's see. Luke 18. Luke 18. So this is the persistent widow. There was a certain city judge who did not fear God nor regard man. Now there was a widow in that city, and she came to him saying, "God, get justice for me from my adversary." And he said within himself, "Though I do not fear God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me." Then the Lord said, "Hear what the unjust judge said. And shall God not avenge his own elect who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth?" And I think that that's dealing with the rapture and not the time inside of the 70th week or the tribulation. So I think that when you see that when he talks about there being a long period of time, the rich ruler went away for a long period of time, or the judge, the vineyard owner went away for a while, or after a long while. I think that when he's talking about that long while, he's talking about the last 2,000 years of this, the church age, the dispensation of the church is this long period of time. So he says here, I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth? Oh, let me back up one. And shall God not avenge his own elect who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? So when I see that word long, and I'm thinking like, okay, he's talking about a period of time, a long period of time that he's been dealing with this. Or all the other parables that seem to indicate that there's a long period of time between the judge, the vineyard owner, the rich young ruler, or not the rich young ruler, the ruler, the king. He goes away and then comes back after a set period of time. that this is that area, the dispensation. And I think honestly, like if you want to look at it like this, I mean, there's 8 billion people probably plus on this earth right now. How many of them are actually truly believing in Jesus Christ, like believe in salvation by grace through faith in the finished work of Christ? How many is that? I don't know, but it's definitely a minority, a huge minority in, taking that against the total population of the world. So I think we probably fulfill that right now. There's not a lot of people, even within Christianity or within Christendom, that are watching and waiting for him to return. At least it's my reckoning of that. I don't think it deals with inside of the tribulation. I don't think it deals with the Jews right now, because the Jews have that partial hardening that Paul talks about in Romans 11, currently overshadowing them. And then inside of the 70th week, I mean, everything is happening so fast, bam, 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 that, there's not going to be a lot of unbelief inside of the 70th week. You're either going to be 100% on Team Jesus, or you're going to be 100% on Team Devil, Team Antichrist. So, I mean, there's not going to be a lot of fence sitting inside of the tribulation. I mean, you're not given that option. You either have to take the mark of the beast or you're dead. Okay. Ew. There's a lot of questions. Jay Hamby, since Israel's repentance and faith brings back Jesus, why does he ask if he will find faith on the earth? Again, I don't think it. I think he's dealing with the end of this particular age and not the end of the 70th week, because like you said, they are going to have those that are crying out for Jesus to return, of the Jewish people. And that would be the remnant that flees after the midpoint and flees to Petra or wherever they go, and God preserves them for the last 3.5 years, and they're the ones crying out for him to return, or finally cry out at the end, like it mentions in Zechariah, I think 12, Zechariah 12, 10 through 14. So they are going to finally, and Jesus said, I'm not going to return until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And that's where they're going to be doing that in that time period at the very end of the second half of the 70th week. Candace, if my pastor taught a sermon, a second in the series, and he is clearing confusion. Oh, he's clearly confusing the rapture for the second coming. Should our family find a new local church? Your thoughts? That's hard. I mean, if in all other aspects of this that church is a good church, you're not perfect, but a good church in terms of like good youth program, good, whatever. And I don't know if you have a lot of other churches in your area that you have to choose from. Some people don't have that luxury. So I say, if you have the opportunity to find a good, church that teaches the whole of the Bible and not just parts and pieces, or, makes a mess of particular doctrines inside of the Bible, then yeah, I would look at a different church. But if you don't have that option, you maybe can go to that church and then augment it with your own small group at your own house and say, hey, we're gonna teach every Sunday night or Wednesday, whatever night it is, and we're gonna teach Bible prophecy. If you want to come, you invite people, and you may start off with a couple here and there, and then it may grow into something else. So yeah, I don't think any church you're ever going to find is going to be perfect in every facet, unfortunately. But
So yeah, I think if you have the opportunity to go find a different church, and it's, you know, it's not going to cause a divorce or, you know, break the family up or whatever, then I would do it. But if you can't, and there's no other really good options to do it, you either do it at your house, or you you go there with that full recognition that, hey, this church is not cutting the mustard, so to speak. And I would, you know, I don't know if you want to talk to your pastor and say like, hey, why? I would take the printout. There's a printout that has all of the major distinctions between the rapture and the second coming, like clear distinctions. And a lot of people have done these. You can find them online very easily. Rapture for a second, and we're like, just hand it to them. Like, how can these be the same event when there's so many clearly different things about each event that they can't be the same event? You know, one starts the 7-year tribulation, the other one starts the millennial kingdom. That's a big difference, right? Anyways, so I think if you can, you should, but if you can't, you know, you could try to bring it to the pastor's attention. Most pastors that I've ever talked to about this stuff, they don't want to hear anybody telling them what to believe or not to feel like. They consider them, most of them would consider themselves the subject matter expert, and you're just the laity. So you need to go back and sit on your pew. Unfortunately, that's like that. Or, you know, set some time aside, set an office appointment with them, and have that printout and just hand it to them and say, well, look, you know, you taught on Sunday, you said, hey, you know, the rapture is the second coming, same event, blah, blah, blah. Here's all the 20 major differences between the two events. How can they be the same event? And just see what they say. Now, that could put you in hot water if you plan on staying at that church, because then you might become the new black sheep candidate for that church. I've been there, been there, done that. So it comes with its own risk. You know, I don't know how much you love this church or how involved you are with this church. Mikey T. Justice, question about what about those who accepted Jesus as Lord and now are atheist? I have family members who have done this. Others in my family believe these atheists are saved and sealed. Are they saved? Well, ultimately, the only persons that know about your salvation or about whether your salvation is real or not real is you and the Lord. Because a lot of people can go walk an aisle, raise their hands. A lot of people, I've seen a lot of people, that doesn't mean that they're saved. Because you don't know if they're really believing it or if they're just going through the motions on it because they're expected to believe it. And I think that's a danger in a lot of ways with little kids when you and I say this very cautiously because I don't know. I mean, I've obviously shared the gospel with my kids when they were little, but I was doing my very level best to like explain it to them in a way they understand, and yet at the same time, I got saved at a very young age. I was like 6 years old. Madisonville, Texas. I remember it. I don't remember the church, but I remember the town and why we were there and stuff. But did I understand everything doctrinally perfect? No, I didn't understand anything. So I think in one sense, if they did get saved and they truly meant it, and somewhere down the road, either they were not in church anymore, they left, or whatever happened in their life, and they just like gave up on it altogether. I think they're still saved because once you're sealed, you're always sealed. Now, again, a lot of people will make that claim, or they'll raise their hand, or they'll walk the aisle, or they'll say they are. That doesn't mean they are. Again, only that true understanding of whether they're saved or not is really between them and God. So, you know, it's impossible for us to say, and we're not going to make a cookie cutter kind of decision to say, what once somebody walks the aisle, then they're saved. We don't know that. They could have talked to a pastor. They could have prayed. We don't know. Again, we don't know what's really going inside their head. So that's kind of an impossible question to answer.
I'm sure there are a lot of people that think they're saved that are not saved. They think they're saved because they were baptized, or they think they were saved because they can speak in tongues, or that they walked an aisle, or whatever. So I think one of the sure signs that somebody is saved is that if you knew that they were a Christian at some point and then they departed from that and they're miserable, or they are, because you cannot be saved. You cannot be truly born again and then go out and live in the world and expect it to be the same as it was before. I tried that for 15 years. It doesn't work. So deep down inside, you know something's off, and you can never get comfortable in this world when you're born again and then you're going out there trying to forget all that and live back the way you used to live. It's an impossibility. Just Country Girl, do you think the flood and the younger Dryas is the same event? Yeah, I think the flood is what the younger Dryas is, what they're trying to call the flood the younger Dryas, and then they're trying to add another like 4,000 years on, making it like 10,000 years ago rather than 6. So I do think they're the same event. I think anything really beyond 4,000 years past. So from the time of Abraham and before, history gets really, really difficult to parcel out. The carbon, what is it? The carbon 19? No. Whatever the test is they use with carbon. The further back you go, the more unreliable it becomes. And so, yeah, I think that the global flood event from Noah's day is what now a lot of the modern secular scientists, and because the reason they've come up with this idea with the younger Dryas is because it's clearly evident that there was a global flood. You've got on the top of mountains, you've got seashells and all kinds of other stuff that should be at the bottom of the ocean, yet they're on top, the very tops of these mountains. So you see this stuff all over the world. So clearly there was a global flood at some point. And they don't want to accept the Genesis narrative, so somebody concocted this whole idea of a younger Dryas, and they just kind of ran with it, just like the Big Bang Theory or Darwinian theology, evolution, and they're just trying to explain away the real biblical event. Turner Burner question: why was Erica Kirk on stage with a confirmed witch, Nicki Minaj, supporting Christianity? I have no idea. I did not see that. I don't know anything about. I know who Erica Kirk is. I don't watch hardly anything that she's on. I didn't even watch his funeral or his the big ceremony they did after he died. I saw the highlights. I didn't sit there and watch the whole thing. I don't think I've ever watched Erica talk more than 2 or 3 sentences in like an interview or anything. So I honestly don't know. I know Nicki Minaj is now on Team Trump. I don't know any of her music. I don't listen to her. I don't know anything about her either. So again, the only thing I can think of is that Turning Point USA, MAGA, all of that today is like this giant tent, and it's got a bunch of different people inside of it that all agree in the political premises of Trump and what Trump represents in terms of populism, national security, strong borders, strong economy, strong dollar, all that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's a big tent that a lot of people can go inside of and take shelter under, yet they themselves are going to be vastly different in what they believe religiously and ideologically and stuff like that. So I don't know. I didn't see it. I don't know what even the context of that was. So Ready to fly. Should U.S. strike Iran? Do you think Russia will get involved since there's a military response pact between Iran and Russia? I don't think Russia will get involved at all if we strike Iran. I think that they're in such bad shape right now, and this is what the fourth year now that they've been in. Is it the fifth year? No, I think it's the fourth year that they've been in Ukraine. I don't think they're in any position to help Iran other than symbolically or, just gestures. Like I think China flew in a fourth or fifth generation jet to them and dropped it off and left it there. But not that they're going to be able to use it or do anything with that. But it was the gesture of it. Like, hey, we are standing with you. We got your back. It's like when all those people back in, I don't know when this was a thing. You remember when Michelle Obama was holding up the little placard and it said hashtag we believe you or whatever, it was all this virtue signaling. I think that's what that's going to end up being with Russia and China with regard to Iran, a bunch of virtue signaling. They're not in any position to help Iran right at this point. Iran's too far gone. Okay, last question. Do you think Elon prophecy has already been fulfilled or is yet to be fulfilled? I think in part it has been fulfilled. I mentioned this earlier about the Iranian dispersed diaspora, how they've been scattered since the Iranian Revolution. So in part that's kind of been fulfilled. I think that whatever this strike is and whatever this coming strikes end up doing, if it could break Iran in the way that if they hit these nuclear facilities the right way and it leaks radiation, if they even drop if it escalates to the point that Israel drops a bomb on them or something, like an atomic bomb or whatever bomb they have, there's that possibility. I mean, this could get bad for the U.S. I mean, we could have a lot of casualties. We could disengage after just an initial strike. I just don't see us moving all those two carrier groups all the way over there and not doing anything with them significantly. So Trump has already ordered the military industrial complex to beef up production of all these new missiles and bombs and things like that for the next conflict. So he may intend to use whatever they've got out there on them. But I don't think he definitely does not want to do a prolonged, he doesn't want Iraq War 2.0. I think he would prefer Gulf War in not even 100 days or 100 hours, or maybe 100 hours. But I think he would prefer a Gulf War rather than Iraq War 2.0. So yeah, I think whatever happens is going to be fairly quick. And I don't see there being any ground troops other than special forces and Mossad, CIA, the usual suspects that go out there and do the behind the scenes subversion and blowing things up and stuff like that. Assassinations and whatnot. All right, guys, I'm at 3 hours. I did not intend to go 3 hours tonight, but I got to talking for so long. So anyways, thank you for hanging out. I can't even believe that there's still 952 people watching this. I feel like I've gone a lot of different places. Bottom line is the world order that we've been under all of our lives is collapsing. The new world order that's coming, that's being established, is not yet in place. And they're trying to work out all the kinks and everything that is coming with this final beast kingdom, this final system of man that's going to be here on the earth. And so we live in incredibly chaotic and turbulent times, and very wicked times, and very perilous times. And, most of the church is asleep, or they just dismiss prophecy out of hand. And so you're a very select, minute group of people, believers, that are actively watching and waiting for the Lord to return. And it was in Elijah's day, we're not alone. God has his 7,000 that haven't bent the knee to Baal in China and other places around the world. We just this side of the rapture, we're probably never going to see them because we don't, a lot of this, the world's dissected and bifurcated and blocked off and locked away from each other. So it's hard to know, how many true believers are in China. There's probably more believers in China than there are Americans. With that said, I mean, the chances of us ever getting to know and support and help and communicate and collaborate and all those things with them is going to be pretty nil. So, well, we serve a big God, and nothing is impossible for him. Like I said at the outset, they've even gotten the gospel into North Korea. It's insane. So anyways, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. I will be on tomorrow night with Vindog. Again, I don't know when he'll drop the time for it. I want to say probably around 6-ish Central Standard Time, or maybe earlier because he's going to be Pacific time, or as my mom would say, specific time. So yeah, he's West Coast. I want to say 5 or 6. As soon as I get the link for it and stuff, I'll share it with everybody. Wednesday, I'm going to try and do my Substack live for the paid subscribers, and then Thursday I should be on with Curt Reed, Pastor Curt Reed. If we're doing it live, if we're just doing a pre-record, I don't know when he'll post that. And I think the video I did with JB Hickson, it should be out. If you want to check JB Hickson's, that was on cryptids. So you can go to his place to look at that. One last thing. So I got this book from Pastor Mike Spalding. If you can see it, Replacement Theology. Its root, fruit, and consequences for Jewish people and the nation of Israel. Very good book. So check it out. And Olivier Melnick has a similar book on I can't remember what the title is off the top of my head, but Olivier Melnick's another good source for anything having to do with replacement theology, supersessionism, Israel. And again, I think we need to keep our eyes on Israel. I know that Israel is now actively beginning to take measures to start reclaiming the Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland there that what the world calls the West Bank. So I think that is something to keep an eye on, because I do believe that Israel will reclaim the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and make that 100% Israel between now and the rapture, because I think that they're never going to get to the place of peace and security themselves within their state without controlling their heartland of their country. So all that to say, thank you guys. God bless you. I love you all. You're the best audience in the world. I am very privileged to have this opportunity to be here with you. And like I said, Substack is our chance to connect, letting you get on the camera with me and just talking and communicating. And so I look forward to that on Wednesday as well. So thank you guys. And God bless you. Keep praying for me, because Satan has not relented on my family at all. It was a tough week last week. So anyways, thank you guys. Keep me in your prayers. I'll keep you in my prayers as well. Lift up the trapped Americans and Canadians and those folks that are down in Mexico right now that are probably scared out of their minds, trying to get out of there. So anyways, God bless you, and Maranatha.